Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated is Harry Potter. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name in the description below. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 81, Bane. Towards the end of April, a new face joined the Hogwarts staff. A centaur named Firenze took over some of the classes of Professor Trelawney to the vocal displeasure of said divination professor. While Professor Trelawney became upset, Firenze was a rave among the students, especially the girls. Not a day goes by without Lavender and Parvati secretly discussing the advantages of having Firenze as their divination professor and his enlightened ways of approaching the subject. The rumor was that Dumbledore picked Firenze to replace Trelawney the next year, but Harry knew that would not happen. Professor Trelawney, despite her faults, holds a valuable piece of information somewhere in her head about the prophecy. If she were to leave the protection of Hogwarts, she'd find herself as an esteemed guest of Voldemort. Most likely, the Dark Lord would leave her comatose or straight up kill her after extracting the prophecy from her mind. It could be argued that the prophecy would remain hidden deep in her soul and shielded from legilimency, but he was not certain. Prophetic dreams tend to be unpredictable, and he was not certain whether prophecies could be retrieved from the seer after delivery. I suppose that's why Dumbledore keeps Professor Trelawney in Hogwarts. Harry thought. Not that it bothered Harry. Trelawney and Firenze had nothing to do with him. At least, he thought the two fortune-tellers were someone else's headache until he got a request from Firenze for a meeting. Though initially surprised, Harry was happy enough to meet the famed rebel centaur, who got expelled from the rest of the Centaur clan and overnight became the focus of gossip in Hogwarts. Besides, he distinctly remembered Firenze was the centaur that gave Harry a ride out of the Forbidden Forest 4 years back. Harry arrived at classroom 11 on the ground floor as requested by Firenze. The door was left wide open, and Harry saw the floor was slightly mossy, and trees were growing out of it. Magical plants of many varieties were thriving inside the room, robbing the previously unused classroom of its dusty aroma. Instead, the room smelled like the Forbidden Forest without all the doom and gloom. But just as he was about to step into the classroom, he got a sense that he was being watched. Harry paused at the doorway and expanded his senses out of the confines of his body. Harry let out a thoughtful hum as his magic returned with interesting results. Harry carefully stepped into the classroom, seeing Firenze leaning against a tree, whispering something against its bark in a language that sounded gibberish to his ears. Harry Potter, the rebel centaur, looked up from whatever he was doing to stare at Harry. We meet again as it was foretold. He has all the mysterious vibe going on with his seer talk. He'll fit in without an issue. Harry thought. Hi. Welcome to Hogwarts. I hope you had no trouble fitting in. Harry greeted politely while holding out his hand. Thank you. Professor Dumbledore was very accommodating, said Firenze, shaking Harry's hand while looking at him with his crystal blue eyes. You said you wanted to talk to me about something. Harry went straight to the matter after the pleasantries were out of the way. Indeed. Firenze inclined his white blonde head. There is a matter of some importance that you need to convey to your friend Hagrid. He is your friend, is he not? Yes, he is my friend. What did he do? Harry asked curiously, wondering what sort of trouble Hagrid got himself entangled in this time. Just give him a warning, Harry Potter. His attempt is not working. It'd be better to abandon it. What are you talking about? Harry asked, looking blankly at Firenze. I would have warned Hagrid myself, but my interference might exacerbate the problem. My banishment has created tensions in the Forbidden Forest now. Hagrid has enough trouble without a centaur's battle. So, Hagrid is trying to do something to reverse your banishment? Harry asked curiously. No. That's beyond even Hagrid. Firenze shook his head. Then what is he doing that warrants you asking for my help stopping Hagrid? Harry asked. Firenze stared at Harry impassively for a minute before sighing. I gave Hagrid my word that I'd never tell another soul what he is doing. I shall not betray his trust. All you need to know is that you need to convince Hagrid of the folly of his current actions. The attempt is not working. Tell him, Harry Potter. It took Harry a lot of internal searching, but he remembered Hagrid was supposed to have brought his giant half-brother to the Forbidden Forest. He had all but forgotten about that particular can of worms. Interestingly though, he had yet to run into the giant on his many trysts in the Forbidden Forest for training with his animagus form. He suspected Dumbledore must have somehow shielded Hagrid's half-brother from the four senses of all creatures. That was the only reason he could come up with for a giant going unnoticed when he was in his animagus form. Harry didn't immediately spring the discovery on Hagrid as he was a bit engaged with schoolwork and the many sessions of the nights. While the pressure of the Quidditch Cup was now off his shoulders, the pressure of exams came like a ton of bricks. Not to mention, Harry had to juggle his attention between schoolwork, the classes of the nights, and somehow keeping it together every day to face off against Voldemort's mental intrusions. Of all the most exhausting activities, the lion's share of stress came from the training he was giving to the knight. Of late, Neville had requested more advanced training that was geared to employ defense and offensive magic. Once Harry decided to give those extra lessons, he thought to expand beyond Neville. He ended up roping in the Weasley twins, Hermione, Tracy, Daphne, Luna, Ginny, Ron and Katie, into what he called the Accelerated Nightly Course, which focused solely on offensive magic. There was, however, an advantage in giving special lessons to a select group. He could delegate a lesson to Neville, Hermione, Katie or the Weasley twins, while Harry could take a day off. But ever since March began, he let the offensive magic some rest and instead focused on teaching the Patronus Charm to the group. While he saw no immediate use for the group in learning the Patronus Charm, he knew the strategic advantage of sending quick messages was quite useful. In the worst-case scenario, his friends could call and help using the charm. I still don't understand why you insist on asking us to focus on the modified Patronus Charm. I mean, won't it be more useful if we learn to use the Patronus Charm to chase away the Dementors? Asked Hermione. Harry had to admit Hermione had mad skills when it came to mastering magical spells. Therefore, it was no surprise to see Hermione managing to conjure a corporeal Patronus before anyone else. Because communications is a vital part of warfare. It doesn't matter how powerful an army is because defeat is certain when its lines of communication are compromised, said Harry, watching the ethereal otter Hermione created dance around the room. The only way to confirm that you can create a Patronus in the presence of a Dementor is to try and create one in the presence of that creature. Since we don't have a Dementor lying around to test your skill, I suggest you run away rather than confront a Dementor. Running away does not sound like the bravest thing to do. Neville complained, a look of concentration on his face as he tried to make a corporeal form out of the sliver vapor that was coming out of the tip of his wand. In a war, the focus must be on winning the war, not the battles. That's why Dumbledore and the Ministry failed the last time. They obsessed over each battle and nearly lost the war. I'll not make the same mistake, said Harry. Winning battles is important, Harry, said Ginny, looking slightly out of breath. Important, yes. But not necessary for winning the war. On the other hand, strategic retreats allow you to recoup losses, strategize, make the enemy overextend, and set traps. The possibilities are endless. Still, what's the point of learning the Patronus Charm if we are not going to use it against the Dementors? Ron complained, looking grouchy and sweating as only small wisps of silver vapor came out of his wand despite his best efforts. Harry hadn't really wanted to include Ron in the group, but he was present, thanks to Hermione. Hermione had come to terms with Ron and tried to rekindle their friendship. But Harry didn't take in Ron solely because of that. The Weasley family was already a target for Voldemort. Therefore, he thought it'd be better for the Weasleys if Ron had more combat training. What's the point of throwing your life away meaninglessly for the sake of pride? Daphne asked tacitly, and that made everyone fall silent. Self-confidence is necessary for war, but overconfidence is fatal. The Death Eaters fight for personal glory because that elevates them in the eyes of Voldemort. Our strategy should be to use that against them. Use teamwork to take out the Death Eaters rather than fight for pride or glory. That's why communication and retreats are important. If you can't work as a team, I can't tell you about the plan to expose Voldemort. What exactly are you planning, Harry? Hermione asked, dismissing the Patronus charm to look at him curiously. I'll tell you when I think you're ready. For now, the plan remains a secret between a select few, said Harry, his eyes finding George and Fred, who were snickering at Hermione's annoyed look. The Weasley twins laughed at something they muttered amongst themselves, and together, they cast the Patronus charm. 2 magpies formed from silver vapor galloped out of the twins' wands, catching everyone's attention. Well done, Fred, George. Harry clapped. The trick is to think of a happy memory and allow joy to permeate every inch of your body. Harry reminded everyone. I don't think I can do it, Harry. Neville said, dropping his shoulders as his attempt to cast the spell failed for the umpteenth time. It is no easy spell to perform. Most grown wizards are unable to perform the spell. Trust me, the spell does not require great magical power to perform. It depends on your ability to be happy. But happiness cannot be created on a whim. Neville argued, frustration evident on his face. Harry felt some pity for his friend. He understood Neville was tackling everything with brute force because of his singular focus on the Lestrange brothers and Bellatrix. Neville's motivation to train stemmed from his desire to kill or punish the Lestranges for what they did to his parents. Harry walked towards Neville and took him to a corner of the room. Vengeance is a powerful motivator, Neville. But not all magic can be learned because of your burning hatred for Bellatrix and the Lestrange brothers. Harry whispered. You know? Neville asked, his eyes widening slightly as Harry nodded. I know enough, said Harry, patting his friend on the shoulder. I also know there is more than just vengeance in your mind, Neville. If I can perform the Patronus charm, then you can definitely perform it with ease. You just need to find the right memory buried deep in your... Harry trailed off as an idea came to him. Do you trust me? Harry asked Neville. Of course I do. Do you trust me enough to let me inside your mind? Harry asked. Neville took a moment to think before nodding. All right. This might make you feel a little uncomfortable, but keep looking into my eyes, said Harry before diving into Neville's mind using legilimency. Harry was initially bombarded with many memories that reeked of strong negative feelings. He could feel rage as he saw Neville reading the prophet about the escape of the Death Eaters from Azkaban. The image of a witch sporting a deranged look assaulted him. Harry had to forcibly push away all the negativity he was being bombarded with inside Neville's mind, and instead, he began actively searching for memories with a more positive vibe. Harry searched for what seemed forever until he stumbled upon a piece of memory buried deep in Neville's mind. This is it. Harry thought, tugging the memory out so that Neville could feel it and see in his mind. It was the memory of a young Neville visiting his parents in St. Mungo's Hospital on his birthday. Despite their mental impairment, Alice and Frank Longbottom had somehow managed to make a hat in the image of a dragon for Neville's birthday. Neville had been so happy that day as he thought his parents were slowly recovering. Harry pulled out of Neville's mind, and he saw his friend with tears running down his eyes. That was on my 7th birthday. I had forgotten about that day, said Neville. It's the curse of human existence to place despair before hope. But all hope is not lost. If magic caused your parents to suffer, magic can heal them, said Harry. It has been so long, Harry. Everyone says it's impossible. Neville shook his head, rubbing the tears from the corner of his eyes lest someone else saw him. Everyone thought the killing curse could not be stopped. My mother stopped it and made it so that the curse bounced back on the Dark Lord when he tried to kill me. Magic is the art of mastering impossibilities. Are you saying, my father and mother? Yes, they can be cured one day. I think I might know someone who can help us better than the healers of St. Mungo's Hospital, said Harry, squeezing Neville's shoulder. You're not just saying that to, are you? Neville breathed out slowly, overcome with emotion. If death can be defended, then anything is possible with magic. Harry said confidently, patting his friend on the shoulder. Trust me. Now, try the spell again with the essence of the memory in your mind. Neville closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Slowly he raised his wand after taking a moment. Expecto Patronum. A brilliant white light exploded from Neville's wand, making Harry smile. Okay. Now, that's a start, Harry muttered. When the lesson finally ended, Harry was in a good mood and fired up. While he had ended up possibly shouldering one more Herculean task on his shoulders, he was pretty much happy to pursue this one with zealotry. Neville was a good friend, and the Longbottoms were some of the bravest people he knew. He thought they deserved better, and he was pretty sure he was already close to coming into possession of an object that could heal the Longbottoms and even the blood curse afflicting the Greengrass family. Not to mention, he had access to an ancient alchemist. Surely, Paranel Flammel could be of some use in healing the Longbottoms. The good mood that he was in also made Harry decide to approach Hagrid. So, the moment everyone safely returned to their dorms, Harry used the Marauder's map to chart a safe path towards Hagrid's hut. But when he reached the hut, Hagrid was nowhere to be found. This led Harry to track Hagrid using his sensory abilities. However, it was taking too much time. Therefore, he took off into the air, changing his body into sparkling grey mist. He knew Hagrid wouldn't leave a giant in the Centaur or Acromantula territory. That would cause a war in the Forbidden Forest, inevitably ending in Hagrid's brother's death. So, Harry went straight for the portion of the Forbidden Forest that was relatively neutral territory. And that's when Harry came across a few uprooted trees. He immediately knew he was getting closer, so Harry climbed down a few notches from his position. His search finally yielded a result when Harry came across the prone form of a giant. Harry immediately dropped down a few meters from the sleeping giant. To his relief, he also found Hagrid not far from the sleeping giant. "So, this is the big secret you've been hiding," Harry said, walking into the small clearing where Hagrid had lit a small fire to keep himself warm. "Wah! Harry! How?" Hagrid spluttered. "Firenze asked me to pass on a message to you. The attempt is not working." He was quite insistent on being cryptic, but knowing you, I guessed it had something to do with a magical creature, said Harry, waving his wand, transfiguring a pebble into a chair which he used to sit down close to the fire Hagrid made. "His name is Grop. He is my brother. He was being bullied by the others. I couldn't leave him with those giants." Hagrid trailed off. "I understand. He is family, your brother." Harry nodded. "Yeah. Grop is family. Ol' Mum didn't like him much more and she liked me. Giantesses want good big kids, and Grop, he's a runt compared to other giants, only 16 foot. Hagrid trailed off miserably, shooting a pitying look at his snoring brother. "Have you tried to find him a home somewhere else, Hagrid? The Forbidden Forest is home to many other magical races. Won't they object to his presence? If the Ministry gets wind of a giant so close to Hogwarts, you can imagine what they'll do to him," said Harry. "I know. With that woman searching Fair Summit to blame Dumbledore, Grop is in danger. But I don't know where to move him, Harry," Hagrid said helplessly. "Don't worry, Hagrid. We'll figure something out," Harry said. "Do you want to meet him? I've been trying to teach him a bit of English, but it's been difficult, you see." "Perhaps another day, Hagrid. I don't want to disturb Warp in his sleep," Harry said immediately before Hagrid poked at a sleeping giant. "Oh. All right then. Let's go back, and you need to get back to your bed," Harry said. Hagrid shouldered his crossbow and led Harry out of the Forbidden Forest on foot. "How did ya even find me?" Hagrid asked as they struggled to walk through a sea of thick knotgrass on the forest floor. "You're not the only one who knows their way around in the Forbidden Forest," said Harry. "Wait," Hagrid suddenly said, pausing midway while taking out his crossbow. Harry armed himself with his wand as his ears also picked up on movements in the darkness of the forest. "I thought we made it clear you are not welcome in our lands, Hagrid," said a deep male voice from the darkness of the night. Harry saw a man's naked torso coming from behind a pine tree. The chestnut body of the horse attached to the man's torso exited the shade of the tree, making Harry frown as he searched for the rest of the Centaur clan. The Centaur had high cheekbones and flowing black hair that swayed in the wind. If Parvati and Lavender were here, they'd swoon over the Centaur. Harry thought amusedly. How are ya, Megorian? Hagrid asked warily, his eyes looking searchingly at the edges of the line of trees behind the centaur. The bushes around Harry and Hagrid rustled as more centaurs surrounded them. Harry eyed each of the faces, some familiar to him. However, the only one he knew was Bane, the black-bearded mean-looking centaur who sported a cruel look on his face. I hope you remember what we agreed to do if this human set foot on our grounds again? Bane asked gleefully, looking at Megorian. All I did was stop ya lot from killing a friend. Hagrid growled at Bane. Then you should have made better friends than consorting with traitors, Hagrid. Our ways and laws are ours to uphold and defend. Firenze betrayed our ways and dishonored us, said Megorian. I dunno how ya worked that out, Megorian, Hagrid growled. He's done nothing wrong except help Albus Dumbledore. Ha! Firenze swore to be a servant of humans. There is no greater betrayal, no greater shame, a grey-haired centaur said. Servitude. Hagrid said angrily, affronted at the very notion. He's doing Dumbledore a favor. He's selling out our knowledge and secrets to unworthy humans in that school of yours. There is no greater crime than this. Megorian said gravely. If that's your problem, I could arrange for the knowledge of wizards to be transferred to the centaurs living in the Forbidden Forest. Harry offered. Do not speak in our presence, boy. Bane snarled, moving a few steps forward threateningly with a bow in hand. You have probably profited from our knowledge. Harry transformed into his lion form and roared with full might, surging forward. With a swift swipe of his paw, he disarmed Bane. The dark bow in Bane's hand smashed against the bark of a tree, and Harry growled threateningly at the centaur, making Bane stumble back in fear. Harry swiftly changed back into his human form as he took note that bows were being trained on him. Harry flicked his wand, and a bubble of protective shield converged around Hagrid and himself. Speak to me like that again, and your friends will be making funeral arrangements for you, Bane. Harry said in a deceptively cold tone, directing his intent through his flaring magical power. We do not harm the young. Stand down. Megorian said forcefully. The centaurs lowered their bows and took a few steps back, and Harry followed suit by cancelling the shield. I also have a policy of not spilling the blood of magical creatures if possible. But I'm contemplating whether I can exclude morons from that policy. You human. Bane growled. Bane. Megorian warned. Come on, Harry. We've seen enough of these stubborn old mules. Hagrid growled, moving away from the centaurs with Harry closely trailing behind. We know your secret, Hagrid. This is no place for that thing. Megorian shouted at them, as the centaurs slowly withdrew from the forest. Our patience grows thin every day. You'll learn to tolerate I'm. Hagrid yelled back. Bunch of stubborn old mules. Hagrid growled under his breath before turning on Harry with a proud look. Yeah, learn to become an animagus like. Yeah. Harry nodded with a grin. Keep that a secret, though. I have not registered with the ministry yet. Just like James and Sirius, then. Your secret is safe with me, Harry. Hagrid promised jovially. Unless, of course, someone offers you a dragon egg. Harry teased, making Hagrid laugh. Hey, Hagrid. I think we should use a code word when we are talking about Grop. Harry suddenly said. Code word? Hagrid looked in askance at Harry. Yes. Something that'd make others think we are not talking about your brother. Oh. I suppose that's smart with that woman breathing down our necks. Hagrid nodded in understanding. So, what word are we going to use? We can use Bane. It'll be the perfect cover. Even if someone overhears our conversation, they'll find out we were talking about the centaur Bane rather than Grop. Harry suggested with a secretive smile on his lips that Hagrid totally missed. That's brilliant, Harry. Hagrid beamed. Weeks passed in a blur, and the OWL's and Newt's exams arrived with the advent of June. Most students were running around like headless chickens as they took on the exams, but one particular student was under Dolores Umbridge's keen observation. It was none other than Harry Potter. The Potter boy had once again become the talk of the castle with his supposedly stellar performance of magic. The examiners from the ministry were all praises for the boy's skill in magic, especially Madame Marchbanks. The old stoop, which looked a few decades younger after overseeing Harry Potter's practical tests in data, charms, transfiguration and ancient runes. Dolores had to endure hours of praise heaped on the Potter boy from the examiners. The Hogwarts staff were only too happy to pitch in, exalting the boy as if he was Merlin reincarnate. But Dolores was the only one who knew what the boy was planning. No amount of praise and smokescreen could keep her eyes from finding out the truth. Her patience had borne fruit, and just like she predicted, Harry Potter had slipped up with the OWL's exam. She had been secretly following Harry Potter for months and keeping watch on every move the boy was making. It was by luck that she chanced upon the boy's conversation with his friends about a bane. She knew something dangerous was happening, and her instincts were later proven correct. Dolores had secretly followed Potter and found out he was having regular meetings with Firenze and Hagrid. Once she learned that, she had Filch keep tabs on the activities of Hagrid and Firenze. That was how she learned to suspect Potter was somehow building up an army of centaurs to overthrow the ministry. Filch had reported to her about a centaur named Bane living in the Forbidden Forest who was antagonistic towards wizards. From the many conversations she had overheard between Potter and Hagrid, this Bane sounded dangerous. They often talked about Bane being too strong and angry at not being allowed to attack someone. She had a feeling it was the ministry they were talking about. She suspected Dumbledore was building an army with Potter's help to overthrow the ministry. She came to that conclusion when she overheard Potter talking about secretly moving Bane to a location under the ministry's nose. But she didn't act immediately. She still needed to catch Potter in the act to prove the boy's criminal activities to the ministry. Therefore, she waited patiently for the right moment, and when she got word from Filch that the Potter boy was again on the move right after the OWLs were finished, she thought this was the time to act. Dumbledore and the rest of the staff were busy seeing off the ministry delegation while she made her move to catch Potter. She secretly followed Potter under an invisibility cloak as he entered the Forbidden Forest. It was challenging to keep track of the boy, but she somehow managed to move through the forest floor undetected despite the impediments along the way. She didn't know how much time had passed, but finally, Potter stopped near an uprooted tree. Dolores moved closer to see what made Potter stop, but her breath hitched when she saw a giant. Potter is planning on unleashing the giants against the ministry? Dolores thought incredulously. She suddenly remembered reading a story about a clan of giants getting wiped out in The Prophet. That must have been a hoax orchestrated by Dumbledore and Potter. They have transported the giants secretly to the Forbidden Forest to launch an assault on the ministry. The centaurs must also be their allies, and they might be helping Potter and Dumbledore to move the Ginnots undetected to and from the forest. Dolores reasoned. Your plans won't work, Potter. Everything ends now. Dolores muttered under her breath as she took careful aim with her wand. With glee, Dolores released the spell aiming for Harry Potter's back. Stupefy. However, her glee fell apart, giving way to confusion as the red bolt of magic passed harmlessly through Potter's body. Suddenly, her whole perception changed as the Harry Potter standing before her eyes vanished, and so did the trees and the giant. I've always believed that misdirection is a basic concept of magic, a voice whispered succinctly behind her. Too bad Hogwarts never bothers to teach that concept to its students. I've found it to be extremely effective and rewarding. Her wand was wrenched away from her hands, and she found herself hung upside down by her ankles. The invisibility cloak draped around her body vanished, and she looked fearfully into the twin glowing orbs that were Potter's eyes. Potter, you. With a flick of Potter's wand, Dolores found herself unable to utter a single syllable. I think I've heard enough from you, Dolores Umbridge. All your life, you've been nothing but a waste and pain to society at large. Tonight, you are going to be extremely useful for Wizarding Britain. Take comfort in that because you will be in a world of pain. Harry Potter said before darkness claimed her whole. Chapter 82, Department of Mysteries. Harry walked deep into the Forbidden Forest, crossing into Acromantula territory with Umbridge floating by his side. The Horus glasses allowed him to see the giant spiders, keeping their many eyes trained on him from all directions. There were many spiders quietly moving into position above him on the branches of the trees, readying themselves to jump on him from their webs. A brave Acromantula, the size of a bulldog, jumped on Umbridge but was repelled away by the protective bubble flaring up at the last moment. The giant spider screeched in pain as it violently smashed into the ground, kicking up sand and dust. It thrashed on the ground indignantly at being denied its prey and snapped its pincers at him menacingly. "Shush now, little spider. I've come here to speak with Aragog. Now, be a good lad and tell the fellow Harry Potter has come to see him." Harry made a shooing motion at the spider, which only made it more mad. Two Acromantulas tried to take him from his back, but Harry was already aware of the two. Swiftly turning on his heels, Harry let loose two consecutive blasting curses that made the two giant spiders smash into trees. They fell down with a few legs broken, whimpering and screeching in pain. "Now, don't be like that. This won't be like the last time, you little buggers. I'll have you all burned to ashes if you don't behave." Harry shouted, but many more screeches and menacing clicking of pincers filled the air. "All right, you little buggers. You only understand one language. Power." Harry scowled, raising his wand above his head as he gathered his magic for a spell. Torrens Incendio. Bright red flames blasted out of his wand, saturating the air with heat. Long tongues of fire snaked out and lashed against the hairy beasts, leaving searing gashes on its body. The smart ones in the lot fled as soon as heat bared down upon them, while the idiotic ones tried to kill him straight up. Harry burned them without remorse, but he made sure not to kill them. He also had to cover himself and Umbridge under the bubblehead charm as the heat made breathing harder. "Stop!" A loud voice shouted from the darkness, making the Acromantulas surrounding Harry suspend their activities. They screeched but fell back quickly, giving Harry space. After ensuring the spiders had withdrawn, Harry withdrew the fire into his wand, keeping the shield and bubblehead charm intact. Slowly, Harry walked forward with an unconscious Umbridge floating behind him until he came across a steep slope leading to a large clearing. The sky could be seen clearly, with twilight slowly passing to welcome the night and the stars covering the sky's expanse. I should know you. Your smell is familiar." Aragog spoke from the giant cocoon of webs that covered the gigantic Acromantula. Harry stared at the elephant-sized Acromantule for a moment in stunned silence. The gray hairy legs, a giant dome for a head with many large milky white eyes and the pincers the size of an elephant's tusks made Harry uneasy. He tightened his hold on his wand as he walked a few steps forward. "I'm Harry Potter. I've come to speak to you with a mutually beneficial proposition," Aragog said. Harry. "Harry Potter? Ah, yes. I remember now. You are Hagrid's friend." Aragog rumbled. "Yes. We met 2 years back." Harry said frostily. "Ah, yes. My sons and daughter were disappointed indeed. Very disappointed. We rarely get fresh meat of a wizard," Aragog said fiercely. The spiders surrounding Aragog clicked their pincers menacingly, agreeing with Aragog. "And that's what I can offer you, Aragog. I can offer you a steady supply of delicious flesh from wizards and magical creatures. Your family can feast on fresh blood and flesh to their heart's content," Harry said silkily, ensuring his voice reached the many spiders surrounding Aragog. Harry could see the chatter among the Acromantula clan pick up. But any conversation was difficult to follow because of their constant snapping of pincers. "Oh. You want to give my family flesh from your own kind? Why?" Aragog asked warily. "There is going to be a war among the wizards. There'll be many dead wizards, and I suppose there is also something that I want from your family." "What is that?" Aragog asked, intrigued by the wizard's offer and information about a war among the wizards. "Acromantula silk. I'll give you fresh meat, and you'll pay me 10 times the weight in silk," Harry offered. "Ha!" Aragog chuckled. "Do you take me for a fool, Harry Potter? I know the worth of our silk amongst your kind. And I know that your family likes to hunt. I'll make sure to deliver them alive with their magic bound. That's my final offer. Take it or leave it. The excited chatter from the Acromantula clan surrounding Aragog filled the clearing. Harry got the feeling that the offer of hunting wizards or magical creatures excited the giant spiders. I even have the first shipment for your children to enjoy, said Harry, pointing his wand at the floating prone form of Umbridge. The chatter only increased among the Acromantula as their eager eyes were suddenly trained on Umbridge. You drive a hard bargain, Harry Potter. But my family seems interested in what you offer. Aragog rumbled. Harry floated Umbridge away from the protective shield surrounding him. But he kept her at a sufficient height, making the Acromantula clamor beneath her, eager to get their pincers around Umbridge. You are the elder of your family. You make the decision, Aragog. Your family awaits your word, said Harry, standing back and watching the pressure mounted on the old Acromantula. All right then, Harry Potter. We have an accord. The giant spider rumbled after a moment of consideration. Good. Harry smiled, renovating Umbridge from the suspended animation before dropping her on her ass. Umbridge fell on the ground, wandless, and without any means to fight back. The Undersecretary of Minister for Magic screamed as she was picked up by an Acromantula by her waist using its pincers, keeping her upside down. No! Release me! I'm the Undersecretary. She'll be a bit handful, but I believe your family will enjoy feasting on her flesh. Harry turned away from the screaming Umbridge, who was carried away into the darkness of the forest by several eager Acromantula. I believe we shall, Harry Potter. Now then, as a sign of goodwill, you may take our silk as much as you need. Aragog said, a tad upbeat. Creature! Harry called, and the old elf teleported to his side immediately. Take the silk, but make sure you only take 10 times the weight of Umbridge. Yes, master. Creature popped away. Harry was gearing up to ask Sirius to transfer Creature to his custody. The old elf of the Blacks enjoyed working on shady deals like this and was an expert in extracting useful parts from magical creatures. Dobby and Winky were his good pals, but they were a little squeamish after he employed their aid in gunning down the inner circle Death Eaters of Voldemort. They'd oblige any order he gave them, but he knew they didn't enjoy work of shady nature, and therefore, he chose to leave them out of this deal. Creature, on the other hand, approved such business deals that harm others. According to Creature, his black blood was showing by making these deals. Creature's passion for being a black elf might actually keep the little guy from agreeing to work for him on a more permanent basis. Harry kept those thoughts away and focused on the milky white eyes of Aragog. I needn't tell you that our arrangement remains a secret even from Hagrid. Harry reminded the giant spider. Of course, I know. Aragog grumbled. Good. If someone were to know of our arrangement, your meat supply would end, and I'd be forced to act against you. Harry threatened, only to receive an amused chuckle in return from Aragog. You? Aragog laughed. You think you can threaten me, Harry Potter? Threaten? No, not at all. It was a promise, said Harry, unleashing bright torrents of fire that formed a cocoon around Harry and spread out into the Acromantula colony. The heat and light created by the spell kept the smaller Acromantula away until Harry had Aragog surrounded in a ring of fire. You should know that the Harry Potter you knew 3 years back is not the same Harry Potter that stands before you. Keep that in mind, Aragog. Harry warned before canceling the fire and restoring the whole area with a simple flick of his wand. Creature returned to his side carrying a large bundle of Acromantula silk. Creature has the silk, young master. Creature muttered, shooting nasty looks at the spiders. Thank you, Creature. Keep it safe, said Harry. Creature nodded before popping away. I hope you heed my warning, Aragog. For your and your family's sake, I hope we remain on good terms, said Harry before assuming his spectral form and flying away. Harry appeared near the edge of the forbidden forest before calling Dobby. Master Harry, what be Dobby do's for you, sir? Dobby happily asked, bouncing on his feet in excitement. Hey, Dobby. I need you to do what we discussed in Umbridge's room. Pack everything, but only take the essential things with you. Take care not to leave a trace or someone from seeing you," Harry ordered. The plan was to make it look like Umbridge ran away trying to escape the Ministry inquiry. A few features in the Prophet should neatly tie up any loose ends, and the Ministry would soon leave Umbridge alone as they'd have bigger fish to fry soon enough. "Dobby B's doing that, sir," said Dobby before popping away. With Dobby gone, Harry was about to check the Marauder's map to sneak back into the castle, but he was suddenly bombarded by visions of Sirius and Andromeda Tonks getting tortured by Voldemort in the Ministry. He even saw the door leading to the Department of Mysteries clearly in the visions before it abruptly cut off. "Winky!" Harry called, and Winky popped into existence before him within the blink of his eyes. "Master, what can Winky do for you?" "Tell Sirius that the game is afoot for the prophecy orb. He'll understand what to do next." "As you wish, Master Harry," Winky said before popping away. Harry immediately took out the locket secured on a chain around his neck. Pressing the tip of his wand against the locket, Harry reached out to a select group of friends and sent a message. After that, Harry went to the 7th floor and opened the Room of Requirement. The room connected itself to the secret spots inside the common rooms so his friends could walk in as usual during a night's meeting. "It's happening. Voldemort has sent his Death Eaters into the Ministry," Harry said once all his friends arrived. "You never explain why you know who would send his followers to the Ministry and wait for you, Harry," said Tracy. "Because the Department of Mysteries holds a prophecy orb that foretold the fall of Voldemort. Voldemort never heard the full contents of the prophecy last time. He heard a portion of it and thought to eliminate me, and you know what happened next," Harry explained. "So, he wants to know the full content of the prophecy because he is afraid of you. He fears you more than he fears Dumbledore," Daphne said, a strange gleam in her eyes as she stared at Harry like she saw him for the first time. "Well, I call it Potterphobia." Harry shrugged. "Raxperts. My father wrote a feature on what ails the Dark Lord after the war. Raxperts are turning his brain fuzzy," Luna said dreamily, her pale blue eyes gleaming with a subtle hint of mirth. "It might as well be the case, Luna," Harry said fondly, trying his best not to laugh at the notion that some invisible magical creature was making Voldemort bad by buzzing through his ears. Clearing his throat, Harry addressed the rest of his friends. "Anyway, Voldemort is sitting back in his abode, waiting for the Death Eaters to capture me while I lift the prophecy orb from the shelf. Before you ask, all prophecies in the Department of Mysteries can only be safely taken by the people the prophecy mentions. So, what's our plan? Tell on the Death Eaters to Dumbledore and the Aurors?" Ron asked eagerly. "No. Capturing Death Eaters won't do the trick. I have 2 plans. The twins already helped me set up Plan A. That plan hopes to capture Voldemort alive and throw his physical body into the Veil of Death in the Department of Mysteries. No one has survived an execution through the Veil, and I'm hoping the Dark Lord won't be able to resurrect himself if his body and soul are trapped behind the Veil." Harry took a deep breath and immediately continued before anyone could interrupt him. "Plan B kicks in if our plan to incapacitate Voldemort fails. It means I'll have to fight him face to face in a straight magical duel on even terms. But Harry, Voldemort is too dangerous. You said it yourself, he has got a body now and had a year to get familiar with his new body. What if he..." Hermione trailed off, looking fearfully at him. "He won't." "He's not the only one who has grown over the last year, Hermione," said Harry, his eyes holding firm as he believed he had sufficient skill on his side and half the battle was always keeping the battlefield in his favor. "However, a word of warning to everyone. If you want to be a part of this, you'll strictly follow my instructions and never try to make a go at the Dark Lord. Even if you see me getting overwhelmed or injured by the Dark Lord, you'll not come between us. Your sole focus will be on the Death Eaters. Am I understood?" Harry looked at each of his friends assembled in the roar. Katie, Luna, Hermione, Neville, Ron, Ginny, George, Fred, Tracy, Daphne, Cedric Diggory and Barbara Collins stood facing him, ready to embark on a perilous journey. Cedric and Barbara Collins were last-minute additions, and he wanted to keep them as a backup. Cedric, being head boy and a fellow champion last year, made the guy one of the most skilled wizards in the group. Barbara's knowledge of the dark arts was impeccable, and Harry was quite satisfied with her performance in the Knights. Not to mention, Barbara was also the head girl, which gained her a lot of freedom to act within Hogwarts to cover for Daphne and Tracy. Okay. Now, explain your plan, Potter. Let's see whether you need the help of a Slytherin in your Gryffindorish plan. Tracy said, looking rather excited. Give me 5 minutes of your time. I'll be accepting your apologies after that. Harry said confidently, grinning at Tracy. Is everyone clear on the plan? Harry asked one last time after explaining everything in detail. It was not a complicated plan per se. He had built-in safeguards for keeping everyone safe and sound with the help of the Weasley twins and Sirius. Besides, he had trained them all for their roles during the many training sessions. Of course, he hadn't explained the plan to any of them during those sessions, but they were pretty much ready. Seeing that no one had anything to say, Harry decided to proceed. All right. Follow me. Harry led them to the corner of the roar and yanked open a red door. After you. Harry was the last to step into the secret tunnel, and together, they slowly walked the length of the secret passage until they found themselves facing a ladder leading them to a small wooden hatch. One by one, they climbed the ladder and found themselves behind some trees in the Forbidden Forest. Dobby, Winky and Creature were waiting for them with all the essentials Harry's group needed for the mission that lay ahead. Everyone, you'll be using these cloaks for the mission ahead. They are made from basilisk skin. If, for some reason, you cannot conjure a shield, use the cloak to protect yourself from enemy spells, said Harry, as Dobby and Winky handed everyone cloaks made of the gleaming green scales of a 1,000-year-old basilisk. Cloaks made of basilisk skin. How in Merlin's name did you get this, Potter? Barbara asked, her dark eyes greedily looking at the cloak in her hands. Killed a 1,000-year-old hungry basilisk in my second year. Harry said with a shrug of his shoulders, making Barbara stare at him with a dropped jaw. What? Harry raised an eyebrow. That thing was giving me a bad rep in school. Of course. Only a Gryffindor would consider being called the heir of Slytherin a bad rep, Tracy snarked. If it lands me in Azkaban, then yeah. I'll stick with Gryffindor, thank you. Harry shot back. It took them a little over 10 minutes to prepare before they teleported away, thanks to Dobby, Winky and Creature. For some asinine reason, the ministry was vacant. Not a soul could be seen in the ministry atrium. Despite that, the group remained invisible under the disillusion charm as they quietly walked through the atrium towards the lifts. Along the way, Harry saw the Fountain of Magical Brethren. The security guard who was supposed to screen people was also not present on his post. He could even see the brass scale that was supposed to check the wands of visitors on the desk on his way towards the Golden Gates. The gates remained open, and they immediately found the lift that was supposed to take them to the Department of Mysteries. Gentlemen, ladies, if you have any second thoughts, now is the time, said Harry, pulling the golden grill of the lift to the side and simultaneously cancelling the disillusion charm as well. We're with you, Harry. Let's do this. Cedric said resolutely. What we do today will make a difference. If we are lucky, we'll make sure the worst Death Eaters are no longer free. If we're even more lucky, we'll put an end to the war before it starts. So, let's finish this tonight. Cedric is right. Let's finish this here. Neville said, nodding firmly while gripping his wand closely. Very well. Let's finish the war our elders couldn't finish, said Harry, welcoming everyone into the lift. Department of Mysteries. Harry said to no one in the lift. The grill slammed shut, and the lift started moving down until it stopped at a floor where no one was in sight. If this is the security of the Ministry, I wonder why the Dark Lord is even bothering to fight this war in the shadows. He could just waltz right in and win the war easily. Barbara muttered darkly. Harry agreed wholeheartedly with the head girl's assessment. Only the sound of flickering torches along the walls of a lengthy corridor made a sound. Everyone in their group wore dragonhide boots, but they were charmed not to make a sound. They traversed the dimly lit corridor until they reached the plain black door that was the entrance of the Department of Mysteries. "All right, everyone. Place your half masks and glasses and cover your head with your hoods. Your masks will filter the air, and the glasses will allow you to see clearly in the dark. Place sticking charms on all of them as well," Harry instructed. Harry nodded at them when they complied with everything, and they turned invisible again. Harry remained visible, and he pushed open the door to the department. The tip of his wand lit up with bright white light, and Harry stepped inside, closely followed by his invisible friends. Harry closed the door once he was inside, and the walls around him immediately rotated. The door he walked through shifted away. But Harry didn't care one whit as he moved forward. There were many doors before him, but Harry chose a random door and stepped inside. Unfortunately, he took the wrong door. He ended up inside a large chamber with an archway in the middle. The Horus glasses allowed him to see in the dark, so he could see the veil fluttering in the archway. "Nope. Not this one," Harry muttered before stepping back from the chamber. Harry trusted his friends had followed him back from the chamber when he heard the door shut behind him. Nonetheless, Harry marked the door with a color-changing charm, changing the pitch-black door into bright yellow. Harry tried the next door, and luck was on his side as it revealed a long hallway filled with clocks, large and small on either side of the hall. But at the end of the hall, Harry saw the gleaming jewel on a door. "This is it," Harry thought, striding towards the jewel-encrusted door. Harry took hold of the door with his magic and willed it to open. Trusting his friends to follow and do their part, Harry strode forward through the open door into a large chamber filled to the brim with glass orbs on the many shelves. Harry made a show of looking around while he subtly showed a thumbs up to his invisible friends. He waited by the door for some time, giving ample time for his friends to get in position. While this was happening, Harry kept track of the hidden Death Eaters, staying still in the darkness. It was the height of arrogance for the Death Eaters to so brazenly stand in the dark without a disillusion charm. He supposed they thought their dark robes were perfect to blend into the dark. Harry slowly moved forward as he walked between familiar shelves until he reached the stand where the fake prophecy orb was left in place of the original. Instead of touching the fake orb, Harry looked around, subtly taking a packet from his pocket. The pendant tied around his neck shivered 12 times, letting him know his friends were in position. "I find it interesting that you'd hide in the dark like common criminals. Come now, Death Eaters. Are you so afraid of a fifth-year Hogwarts student? What would your noseless master think of you?" Harry snickered, hearing a shriek of rage coming from the darkness. "Stop it, Bellatrix. Remember our orders," Lucius hissed. Soon, the Death Eaters came into the light, surrounding Harry from all sides, making Harry whistle appreciatively. "Well, I'm pleased. That's a lot of Death Eaters. Mr. Noseless must be thinking highly of my abilities, or he thinks so low of your abilities to handle a fifth-year Hogwarts student." Harry chuckled. "You have a loud mouth on you, Potter. But you are surrounded. Your fake bravado will not save you from the darkness cast by our lord," a masked Death Eater growled. "You selves think your master knows darkness? Unfortunately for you, my masked friends, darkness is my ally," Harry said coldly before throwing the packet in his hand straight up. The eyes of the Death Eaters followed the packet, which expanded in size as Harry enlarged the packet while it flew straight up. He followed up the throw with a spell so that the contents of the packet get perfect delivery. Reducto. The packet exploded high in the air, a few inches above the tallest shelves, hosting many glass orbs. The Peruvian instant darkness powder Fred and George Weasley had imported from Peru courtesy of Sirius blasted out of the packet. This powder was slightly modified, however, by none other than Remus Lupin. Harry applied a minor wind spell that spread the powder in all directions, ensuring it affected the entire room. The room went dark as he could see the Death Eaters panic while Harry slipped past them quickly. The Horus glasses he was using allowed him to see through the powder, thanks to Remus tweaking the powder slightly with charms. Like Harry, his friends could also see clearly in the dark, and all their wands were now trained on the Death Eaters. You might be experienced wizards with decades of combat experience. But strategy is the cornerstone in winning battles. Harry thought, raising his wand and taking aim like his friends while falling to his knees and keeping the basilisk skin cloak as a shield. Confringo. Harry silently cast the spell, blasting Bellatrix off her feet, followed by his favorite dark-cutting curse. Sectum Sempra. Harry watched in slow motion as the cutting curse severed the wand arm of Bellatrix at the wrist. Lucky shot. Harry mused, watching coldly as Bellatrix thrashed around blindly on the ground in a pool of blood while her palm lay motionless by her side. He was not the only one. Brightly lit spells smashed straight into the Death Eaters from the wands of his friends from all sides. Now, the battle has begun. Harry thought as more screams filled the air. But he was not done, not by a long shot. Harry carefully withdrew as he observed his friends handling the Death Eaters expertly. It was now time for the next part of the plan. After all, he had a Dark Lord to kill. Chapter 83, The Duel. Voldemort was in a deep trance behind some of the strongest wards known to wizardkind. He had been observing everything that was happening in the Ministry. To be frank, he was observing everything Potter had been doing since he sent the boy visions of Sirius Black and Andromeda Tonks getting tortured in the Department of Mysteries. It had been not easy to ensure the Flu Network and Owls in Hogwarts would not work, and Severus had done his part. Still, it was a gamble on his part, but it worked like a charm. Severus had informed him that Potter was not on good terms with Dumbledore or the rest of the Hogwarts staff. Building on that, he had devised a plan to get Potter out of Hogwarts. Unfortunately, his incompetent Death Eaters were unable to capture the Tonks family or Sirius Black. As a last resort, he had sent a few Death Eaters after the Greengrass family, but those Death Eaters went missing. Either Damian Greengrass killed them off, or those idiots tried to run away from him. Either way, he knew he'd be punishing them both in due time. With no other option left, he had to resort to trickery using the mind arts. He disliked stooping to such cheap tricks to capture Potter, but he was surrounded by incompetent fools. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Therefore, he sent visions of Andromeda Tonks and Sirius Black getting tortured in the Department of Mysteries, hoping to entice Potter to rush after his surrogate family like an unthinking Gryffindor. His plan went smoothly. Potter took the bait and rushed into the Department of Mysteries. Unfortunately, his Death Eaters were proving to be idiots once again. Voldemort grimaced as he watched Bella put the boy through another dose of the Cruciatus Curse, forcing him to temporarily withdraw from Potter's mind. Take the orb, Potter. Or else my master will come here and torture you until your skin peels off. Bellatrix screeched. Fuck you. Potter spat. Bellatrix let out a rageful screech and put under another dose of Cruciatus. Voldemort abruptly stood up and walked out of his lair with long, purposeful strides. He could not have Potter turn into a blubbering mess by Bellatrix's hand. The Potter boy had to be killed by his hand. There could be no doubt left in everyone's mind about his power. Harry Potter had escaped his clutches far too many times, and he had to make sure people understood that their precious hero was slain by his own hand. No one else could be allowed to have the honor of slaying Harry Potter. With this in mind, Voldemort apparat away from his hideout straight for the Ministry. The incompetence of the Ministry didn't disappoint him the least. The entire Ministry atrium was left vacant. It was as if the wizards fled, fearing the breakout of a plague inside the Ministry. But he knew why the entire Ministry was left wide open. All Ministry employees were enjoying a party thrown by Fudge, whose niece was getting married tomorrow. I suppose I could give Minister Fudge a nice wedding present for the family in Lord Voldemort's name tomorrow. The cold dead body of the boy who lived by the fountain should suffice, he thought amusedly, gliding through the vacant halls passing by the fountain of magical brethren. He couldn't help but sneer at the stupid statue of lesser magical creatures standing as an equal to wizards. That'll be the first thing to go in my reign, Voldemort promised to himself as he entered the lift. Department of Mysteries. The lift started going down, and anticipation built up within him. He could feel that he was so close to victory over his greatest enemy. With the death of Potter, the hold of prophecy over him would go. He was sure his deteriorating health was somehow linked to the prophecy. There was no other explanation, as he had tried to cleanse his body with the blood of 100 pure souls. Not only did his weakness remain, but Voldemort felt like the counter-ritual only increased the deterioration of his body. The only answer he could see in the absence of any other explanation was it had something to do with the prophecy. He cursed himself for being short-sighted last year. He had assumed Harry Potter's blood would increase his power, incorporating the old magic protections Lily Potter bestowed on her son into his new physical form. In his haste, he had forgotten to consider how the prophecy would affect him. Immortality is a double-edged sword. It makes me blind to the subtle aspects of magic. It is the same mistake I made when I confronted the Potters. Voldemort mused. The lift came to a stop at the lowest level of the ministry, and the grill slid to the side. He slowly stepped out of the lift and stared at the jewel-encrusted door of the Department of Mysteries. All those mistakes will be undone tonight. I, Lord Voldemort, will become invulnerable. He thought, opening the jewel-encrusted door and leisurely strolling inside the Department of Mysteries. Contrary to his expectations, Voldemort found the Hall of Prophecies to be empty, sans the many prophecy orbs in the dozen or so shelves arranged inside the expansive hall. He could not help but glare at the hall, confused out of his mind. There was also a gnawing fear scratching at the base of his mind, but he found it easy to shove that feeling aside. He moved forward, looking around for his Death Eaters and Harry Potter, but try as he might, he could only see the innumerable orbs made of glass glowing eerily on the shelves. The rest of the hall was hidden away in a veil of darkness, which bothered Voldemort more than he let on. He felt as if his every move was being watched. But his blazing red eyes could not find anything in the darkness. He stopped walking once he reached the prophecy orb that had haunted his dreams for more than a decade. His eyes traced the distinct label beneath the orb, where he could see the undeniable proof of his destiny within his hand's reach. SPT-2A. PWBD. Dark Lord Harry Potter. Once again, Voldemort stared at the vacant hall for his Death Eaters and his nemesis, but there was no sign of them. Could they have left the hall while I was on my way to the ministry? He mused distractedly. His eyes went back to staring at the glass orb, enticing him with the entire content of the prophecy. Voldemort could no longer suppress his curiosity, and for the life of him, he could not fathom why he didn't do this sooner. After all, why the heck should he be scared to stroll deep inside the bowels of the ministry? He was Lord Voldemort, after all. Reaching out with his pale white hand, Voldemort took the orb into the palm of his right hand. The glass orb remained impassive in his hand despite waiting for a while to see whether the orb showed any reaction. The orb started to let out a small light, garnering Voldemort's attention. Bringing the orb closer to his eye level, he saw there was some kind of smoke moving inside. The smoke suddenly developed a smiley face inside the orb, making Voldemort frown. Little Tommy wanted a peek. He was a loser nosy boy. All he got was a smack on his cheek. For he had no nose for a flick. Little Tommy wanted a peek. He was a loser nosy boy. All he got was a glassy bowl. For his troubles to be a sneak. Little Tommy wanted a peek. He was a loser nosy boy. He forgot he was a baldy boy. With a face even a mother would balk. The loud, high-pitched, girly voice singing coming from the glass orb made his ears ring. The rage and hatred Voldemort was feeling right now was unimaginable. He was right about to smash the orb when it shattered in his hand and turned into pink dust that quickly covered his entire body. He couched out the powder as he accidentally breathed some of the powder through his nose and mouth. With a flick of his wand, Voldemort tried to vanish the pink powder, but that created a massive explosion, and he was consumed by a raging fire. Eh ha ha! Voldemort screamed as the magical fire burned through his skin and robes. With a mighty bellow, he snuffed out the flames by absorbing them into his magical power by converting the fire into wisps of magical energy and pulling it away with the tip of his wand. However, Voldemort was allowed no respite as he was immediately assaulted by the need to scratch all over his body. While he struggled to get a grip on what was happening, the shelves carrying many other orbs in the prophecy hall began to fall one after another. With one hand, Voldemort tried to scratch himself to death, while with his wand, he banished the orbs and shelves that came close to his body. His senses suddenly screamed danger, and he placed the strongest shield around him. Not a moment later, 4 pairs of bludgers violently smashed into his shield. But the iron balls found themselves grinding to a halt as his shield refused to grant them entry. Observing the bludgers more closely, Voldemort realized they were targeting his limbs, possibly to immobilize him. A trap of this depth on such short notice. How? Voldemort mused as he destroyed the bludgers with a couple of blasting curses. Voldemort was still feeling the urge to scratch all across his body, and he was suffering from pain because most of his body was burnt. He decided not to waste any more time in the hall and was about to make a run for it when a figure emerged from the shadows. He only had time to widen his eyes as the shadowy figure acted before he could defend himself. Batio Inflammata. Voldemort immediately regretted canceling the shield around him as he was smashed through a line of shelves by a familiar fiery spell that singed his arms under its assault. The air was knocked out of his lungs as he was forced through a wall into another chamber. He let out a scream of pain and rage as he could feel intolerable pain flare up from his back. With some effort, Voldemort managed to climb to his feet, but he could hear several voices asking him to come to their side. His red eyes widened as his eyes fell on the veil of death pulsing with a silver sheen. The voices from the beyond became more pronounced, and for a moment, he could hear several voices of his victims from the veil. He took several steps back in reflex as fear permeated every corner of his body and soul despite being assured of his immortality. Voldemort, the one who flees from death. I should have seen this coming, but I expected my enemy to have some standard regarding what he fears the most in the world. Instead, I find myself disappointed in you, Riddle. Voldemort gritted his teeth as he slowly turned around to see his arch-nemesis step into the light from the shadows with his glowing green eyes wand in hand. You? Voldemort snarled, banishing a wooden table straight against the smug face of Harry Potter. A fiery red shield materialized between them, burning away the table into fine dust and making Voldemort's eyes twitch. Me? Who else did you expect to see in this trap, Riddle? After all, you were the one who desperately wanted to see me and created an elaborate scheme to get me into the Department of Mysteries. Harry tilted his head to the side, giving the Dark Lord a chiding look. Well, it doesn't matter what means were used. I'm here now as you wanted. You can surrender to me now and apologize for all the cruel things you've done. I, being a gracious wizard, accept your unconditional surrender. Out of the goodness of my heart, I'm even willing to forgive you for killing my parents. If you give me an unbreakable vow to leave the British Isles and never step foot on these shores, I'll happily leave you alone and never knowingly disturb you in any way. What say you, Riddle? You dare mock me, Potter? Lord Voldemort never surrenders, least of all, to a scrawny toddler like you. Voldemort snarled, his red eyes blazing with rage. Ah, yes. You have a habit of disintegrating into ashes before babies. How silly of me to forget that. I apologize if I have struck a nerve there, mate. Harry mocked. Avada Kedavra. Voldemort jabbed his wand with every fiber of his being oozing with hatred. Harry shielded himself by placing a glass orb on the spell's way. The killing curse struck the glass, shattering it to dust, but the curse was successfully thwarted. For someone who fears death, you throw around the killing curse like cotton candy. I fear nothing. Voldemort snarled, transfiguring several broken wooden pieces into snakes. Bite him. Kill him. Voldemort ordered in Parseltongue, causing the snakes to rush towards Harry with their fangs at the ready. Incendio. Harry waved his wand in a wide arc, burning away the snakes easily. If you fear nothing, why is your wand arm shaking? Harry shot back while conjuring a metal spoke and banishing it towards Voldemort. Arrgug. Voldemort screamed in rage and launched a flurry of curses at Harry, who chose to deflect a few back while dodging the rest by moving around in the chamber. Where are my Death Eaters, Potter? Voldemort asked angrily. Why ask me when you can sift through my memories, Riddle? After all, you are a master of the mind arts. Or are you? Harry finished ominously. Voldemort's eyes widened as his senses suddenly went chaotic. His magic was screaming at him to step away, and he realized with growing horror that he had somehow walked right next to the Veil of Death. With wide eyes, he looked towards Harry Potter, but a stab of fear took birth in his heart when he saw the image of Harry Potter slowly disappear. Instead, he found Harry Potter sitting on a table in a relaxed manner. "You? When did you get inside my head?" Voldemort asked fearfully, training his wand on his most hated nemesis. "I see. Let me ask you then, riddle. Why do you think I was never in your head from the beginning?" Harry asked with a raised eyebrow. Voldemort let out a frustrated yell before immediately firing another killing curse, but it passed through harmlessly, and Harry flickered away as if it was a mirage. "No. This is not possible. I'm Lord Voldemort." The Dark Lord let out a terrifying roar, unleashing all his magic and rage. The thick magic unleashed was quickly turned into bright, hot flames of the Fiendfire curse, which spread out into every corner of the chamber. Voldemort laughed like a maniac as he unleashed the flames of hell all around him. But he glared ominously at the veil of death that remained unharmed despite the bright flames of Fiendfire curse trying its best to destroy the archway. After many attempts, Voldemort turned away from the archway and directed the flames at everything around him. He willed the flames to pour out of the veil chamber and spread it into the Hall of Prophecies in search of his most hated enemy. "Where are you, Potter? Come out and face me." Voldemort screamed as he unleashed more power into the Fiendfire curse to burn everything faster as he sought out his enemy. "Well, there goes my plan to blast Snakeface into the veil of death in flames," Harry muttered as he ran for his life as the Fiendfire curse gobbled up everything in its path. Harry cursed himself for not considering Voldemort using the Fiendfire curse inside a tightly packed chamber. He had counted on the Dark Lord's self-preservation to keep the man from using a curse as volatile as Fiendfire in the bowels of the Ministry. He should have just stopped gloating around and blasted Voldemort into the veil, even though there was a very low chance of that working. Voldemort was a gifted censor. Harry was sure he was only able to trick Voldemort for so long because all the other steps in the plan worked flawlessly, and the Dark Lord was not in his best state of mind. Harry knew he had wasted a great opportunity because of his hubris. And now, he was paying the price for his overconfidence by running for his life as a serpent made of hellish flames chased him through the many halls of the Ministry. Protego! Harry put up a shield behind his back just as the flames tried to catch him. The shield spell kept the flames at bay while Harry quickly turned into his spirit form to escape faster from the hellish flames. Assuming his spirit form, Harry flew straight towards the doors of the prophecy hall, but the flames quickly converged on the door, cutting off his escape. "Oh fuck!" Harry muttered as the flames converged together and formed into a giant serpent. Harry turned in midair and went straight towards a wall at full speed. Along the way, he solidified his arm and aimed at the wall with his wand. Bombarda! The spell blasted the wall open, allowing Harry to escape the Hall of Prophecies consumed by Fiendfire. Unfortunately, the hellish fire followed him to the time chamber, where rows and rows of time turners could be seen neatly arranged on many shelves. With a roar, a serpent made of fire smashed through the hole Harry made in the wall and entered the time chamber inside the Department of Mysteries. "Fuck me!" Harry muttered before running away as fast as his legs could carry. The time turners began to fall one after the other as the raging fire inside the chamber. A few of those time turners bounced off of his head, making Harry flinch. The chances of getting caught up in a space-time continuum were high, with time turners raining down on top of him, but somehow, he managed to traverse through the length of the hall with a few scratches and a small bump on his head. It was by the skin of his teeth that Harry managed to escape the time chamber and exit the doors to the Department of Mysteries. He quickly found the lift and escaped to a higher level. Harry found his friends patiently waiting by the fountain in the Ministry atrium, along with Sirius, Remus, Fleur, and Nymphadora. "Run!" Harry shouted as he ran towards them. "Why? What's going, Holy Ghost of Merlin?" Sirius breathed out with wide eyes, seeing a giant serpent made of fire smash through the lift Harry ran out a moment ago. They all ran as fast as they could put some distance, but Harry paused once he reached the Fountain of Magical Brethren. Turning swiftly on his heels, Harry used the spell he had created to subdue the Fiendfire spell a few months back when he was preparing to finish off the giants. Locus Sigillum. Harry drew a small circle in an anti-clockwise direction with the tip of his wand in the immediate space before him. A black circular tear in space formed before him and collapsed in on itself right when the fiend fire spell barreled towards him in its snake form with its jaws wide to devour him. But the spell Harry used let out a powerful repelling force that smacked away the head of the fiery snake before dragging the flames into the tear formed in space. A violent vortex of wind formed around the tip of Harry's wand as it pulled the hellish fire into the eye of the storm. The sound of crackling flames was drowned out by the whooshing air as the hellish fire of the fiend fire curse was dragged away into the folds of space. Once the last ember of flame was sucked away, Harry cut off the spell, forcing the space to seal itself shut, sealing away the raging fire of the dark spell in a pocket of space accessible only to Harry. "You have been a permanent annoyance to me since you were born, Potter," Voldemort snarled, looking positively livid after seeing the fiend fire getting sealed away. "I'll try my level best to keep up my performance for the foreseeable future until you die." Harry snarked. "No. Not if you'll die here." Voldemort snarled, brandishing his wand and firing off a familiar green spell. Avada Kedavra. Harry was ready to face that spell with something of his own. Fulminata. A bright blue arc of lightning arced out of the tip of Harry's wand, striking the killing curse in midair. The two spells clashed against each other before locking themselves in a battle of wands enforced by the brother wand effect. A golden energy dome suddenly formed around Harry and Voldemort, shielding them from everyone else in the atrium. Harry felt his feet leave the floor as Phoenix song filled the air. The meeting point between the spells glowed with a bright golden color, forcing him to avert his eyes. He poured more power into the spell, and that was enough to push the meeting point towards Voldemort's wand. Harry was fortunate because Voldemort was scared shitless by what was happening, and the Dark Lord was relatively weak. Therefore, he encountered little resistance until the meeting point between their spells finally touched the wand. A sharp trill emerged from the wand, and one by one, the souls of those who died at the hands of Voldemort emerged. To Harry's horror, so many children's souls emerged from Voldemort's wand. "You can do it, big brother. Kill the monster. I'm scared. Help me. Mommy. Daddy." The desperate cries of children filled the Ministry atrium, spiking Harry's rage as he realized Voldemort had gone on a killing spree after getting resurrected. "You bastard son of a whore!" Harry snarled. With a sharp tug upward, Harry broke the connection, and before Voldemort could recover from the fear of seeing so many of his victims appear in their spirit form, Harry unleashed a curse that connected with full power. Defodio. The gauging curse punched through Voldemort's shoulder, making the Dark Lord howl in pain. Sectum Sempra. The dark cutting curse cleaved through Voldemort's left arm, cutting it off clean at his shoulder. The silence that followed was deafening as Voldemort stared numbly at his severed hand in disbelief. The silence was broken by one of the mute spectators of the whole battle. "Good Merlin!" Harry turned his eyes sharply to the sound and found that it belonged to none other than Minister Fudge. "He's back! He's back!" Fudge kept on muttering, staring slack-jawed at Voldemort. You'll suffer for this, Potter. You'll know the true might of Lord Voldemort." Voldemort growled. "Based on what I've seen so far, I believe I've nothing but disappointment to look forward to when you're involved, Riddle." Harry shot back before Voldemort let out a frustrated yell and operated away. "I believe you've had an eventful evening, Harry," said Dumbledore, looking rather tired and older than he ever looked as he slowly made his way towards the group. It had seemed so, Headmaster Dumbledore. Harry said blandly, but otherwise didn't deign the man with any response as he focused on the Daily Prophet reporters and Ministry officials. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a war to fight that you are too spineless to finish." Harry turned his back on Dumbledore and walked towards the Ministry employees and Wisengamot members in the crowd. While his plan to kill Voldemort went up in smoke, his plan B was still salvageable. It was time to spread his reach in the Ministry and form his own faction. Today would be the first step in a long series of moves that'd lead the way to the highest office of power in Wizarding Britain. Chapter 84, The Time Heist Part 1. The Ministry was in an uproar over the aftermath of the fight between the Dark Lord and Harry Potter. The fact that the entire event transpired inside the Ministry premises was more than enough to spell the end of Fudge's term. No one knew this better than Cornelius Fudge himself, and that was why the man was groveling at Dumbledore's feet. Amelia could only look on with amusement as she watched Minister Fudge all but wash the feet of Dumbledore with water and drink that water as if it were the greatest cure for all ailments. But she doubted Fudge would find much luck with Dumbledore. On the other hand, the illustrious headmaster of Hogwarts was pretty much set on events to play out naturally without his interference. There was no doubt after tonight, Fudge would be pressured out of his office even if Dumbledore chose to support the man. Dumbledore remains a well-respected wizard and holds enormous influence among the Wizengamot members. But that influence had proven to be fickle with the latest witch hunt by the Ministry. Fudge didn't succeed in keeping Dumbledore suppressed for nearly a year because of his skill but because of the enemies Dumbledore cultivated after the First Wizarding War. A silent minority within the Wizengamot and the Ministry had wanted reformation, and they were cheated out of that by Dumbledore and his insistence on keeping the status quo. When Dumbledore compromised his ideals to shake hands with the likes of filth like Malfoy, McNair, and Nott, a permanent fissure was created in the base of Dumbledore's political base in the Ministry. It was that same group that tactically aligned with Fudge to let Dumbledore reap his just deserts. And now, that same group was going to pull Fudge down. After all, she had worked diligently in the shadows to set up Fudge for the big fall. But merely pulling down Fudge was not enough. The entire Ministry needed to be purged and rebuilt from the ground up. There was no other time than wartime to accomplish such a task, and she now had the backing and resources to pull off such an ambitious task. "You must do something, Dumbledore. You must help me," Fudge begged. "I warned you last year, Cornelius. I warned you about Voldemort's rise, and what was your response to my warnings? You declared war against me instead of preparing the Ministry to face Voldemort. I know, Dumbledore. I know." Fudge let out a pitiful groan while rubbing his face tiredly. "I was wrong. I made a mistake. Can we put this behind us and work together?" "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Minister." Amelia spoke up, earning the attention of both men in the room. "What do you mean, Amelia?" Fudge asked warily. "I've just received word from some Wizengamot members. There have been some movements within certain factions, and the topic under discussion pertained to your removal from the post of minister," said Amelia, staring impassively at Fudge, whose chubby face now looked like melted ice cream. "It won't be long before the Prophet starts printing the whole story about a bunch of teenagers breaking into the Department of Mysteries to fight and capture Death Eaters. They'll also know Harry Potter fought a very much alive Dark Lord to a standstill and cut off his arm in a duel all on his own." While all this was happening, not a soul in the Ministry was aware of what was going on. Amelia. You? How am I going to get through this?" Fudge groaned, putting his sweaty face into his palms. Amelia could only feel a surge of excitement seeing Cornelius Fudge. But the man was a corrupt wastrel who was not really the object of his ire. He was just the product of the corruption in the Ministry. Her ire had always been on people like Dumbledore, who promised change and attracted the young of their world to waste their lives on false promises like her brother and sister-in-law. Her entire family, including her parents and grandparents, had paid the price for her brother's misadventure in joining Dumbledore's stupid crusade to reform murderous scum who should have been put down like rabid dogs. Not only did Dumbledore fail to reform the Death Eaters, but the old man was directly responsible for allowing them to grow in strength and blocking her path over the years to make them pay for their crimes in the interest of keeping the status quo. She had lost all hope and was ready to slink back into the shadows to care for her orphan niece, but she received an unexpected visitor who offered an alternate route. Amelia hadn't blindly taken the words and offers of a stranger for granted. She had seen for herself with her own eyes about the visitor's claims replicated in other wizarding communities across the world. The visitor offered no grand utopia, but she was convinced things could be better, and leaving Wizarding Britain as it was would only spell disaster down the line. "Maybe Harry Potter can help me, Dumbledore." Fudge suddenly sat up straight with an excited gleam. This time Amelia couldn't hold herself back from grinning at the buffoon who adorned the post of the Minister of Magic. "How exactly do you expect Harry to help you, Cornelius?" Dumbledore asked passively. "He can help me, Dumbledore. If Harry says certain things in favor of the Ministry, yes, why yes, it could work splendidly. All Harry has to say is that the ministry was aware, and everything happened with my full blessings. Amelia looked at Fudge like the man had grown another head. She marveled at the depth of idiocy and ignorance on display by the Minister of Magic. But she held her tongue and let the man walk into a hole of his own making. Besides, it's almost time for the fun to begin, Amelia thought. Just then, the door to the minister's office swung wide open. Amelia's eyes fell on the faces of Damian Greengrass, Sirius Black and Harry Potter. Behind the trio were a few Wisingamot members, all members of a secret faction that was carefully built over decades with careful planning and patience. Harry. How wonderful to see you. We were just talking about you. Fudge's eyes lit up with delight, and the blubbering man climbed to his feet with his bowl hat in hand. Amelia couldn't help but roll her eyes, lamenting at the fact that an idiot who could not even read the room somehow ended up as the Minister of Magic. Then again, that was probably why most of the pure-blood maniacs supported the man in the first place. While Minister Bagnald was as corrupt as they come, at the very least, she managed to hold the ministry together when the Dark Lord was in his prime. On the other hand, Fudge was chosen by the Wisingamot as the Minister of Magic precisely because he was easy to control through bribes and threats. But that was soon coming to an end. It was now time for the rot infecting the ministry to be cut out without mercy. Minister Fudge. You'll immediately declare a nationwide emergency in the wake of Voldemort's sighting inside the ministry atrium. After which, you'll resign, thereby transferring your post to Amelia Bones, who in your absence becomes the natural head of the ministry in her capacity as the head of the DMLE. Harry declared, leaving Fudge to gape like a fish. Amelia could feel her smirk widen as she stared at the surprise on the two men she hated most, Albus Dumbledore and Cornelius Fudge. You want Amelia Bones to become the interim minister with all the emergency powers assigned to her position? She was trying to put Sirius in prison a year ago. Harry whispered furiously at Damian Greengrass. Because she plays her part well, Harry. Amelia Bones is Lady Lilith's creature through and through. She'll do anything to maintain her position in the ministry, including pretending to harass you to gain the confidence of the likes of Fudge and many other players who wanted Sirius silenced. Damian explained earnestly. She was working for her? Harry asked curiously. Yes, Harry. Once Fudge declares a nationwide emergency and resigns, Amelia will be in a position with unlimited power without facing an election. We'll make our move on the Wisingamot members supporting the Dark Lord and Dumbledore's stooges who obstruct the ministry from using deadly force. We'll use the Aurors and Lady Lilith's men to bring them into our cause. Those that won't turn will be quietly disposed of. Within a few months, we'll have the ministry under our command. Then, the real purge will start, removing all obstacles from your path to eradicating the Dark Lord and his cause. But still. Amelia Bones. Harry trailed off hesitantly, unable to believe that the head of the DMLE was a Flamel loyalist all this time. Why do you think she sent her Aurors on a merry chase across the continent for your godfather? She was instructed not to capture Sirius by Lady Lilith. But she had to act in a certain way to ensure the likes of Malfoy and not were not tipped off, said Damian. Harry let out an angry huff and proceeded to walk back and forth in the lobby while he thought over what to do. Harry, we don't have much time to waste. We must press the advantage while we still hold it. Fudge is like a cat in a boiling water. We must turn up the heat, and that'll be enough to make him jump to save his own hide. Harry was hesitant to go ahead with Damian's plan because he could not trust them, and his own plans were entirely different. However, he acknowledged this was an excellent opportunity to hijack the ministry. The confusion and fear would soon settle with Dumbledore's cooperation. It'd give the ministry bureaucracy the breathing space to step in and keep the status quo until the elections happen. The time it takes for fresh elections to be conducted would be the lifeline for Voldemort and the bureaucracy to act. All right. We'll do it your way. But I have a condition. Harry agreed, keeping in mind that he could turn the tables around on Perenelle Flammel by having her carefully constructed faction in the Wisingamot transferred into his control in exchange for access to Slytherin's chamber and the secret hidden inside. Name it, Harry, said Damian. Harry stared at Daphne's father silently for a moment before he whispered his demand into the man's ear. While a bit confused by the demand he made, Damien vowed to abide by his demand. Harry managed to convince Sirius to go along with the plan by the skin of his teeth. He was not the only person to hold a grudge against Madame Bones. But Sirius was eventually convinced that Amelia Bones would be a manageable figurehead they could use against the supporters of Voldemort in Dumbledore. After that, Harry had to get reacquainted with some of the major Wizengamot players under his grandmother's thumb. Some of them he had met at the ball hosted by Daphne's family last summer. There were only a few new faces he had to acquaint himself with, like Amir Shafiq, Olivia Blair, and Lachlan Brown, before stepping into the minister's office. Harry led the delegation into the minister's office and saw Dumbledore sitting across from Fudge. He knew he had to go for the jugular from the start if the plan made the desired result. Minister Fudge. You'll immediately declare a nationwide emergency in the wake of Voldemort's sighting inside the ministry atrium. After which, you'll resign, thereby transferring your post to Amelia Bones, who in your absence becomes the natural head of the ministry in her capacity as the head of the DMLE. Harry said, leading with a dialogue he thought would unsettle the Minister of Magic. Going by the wide eyes and the impression of a gaping fish made by Fudge, Harry was certain he nailed it. Wah! Preposterous! Fudge spluttered, looking like melted ice cream. On the contrary, Minister Fudge. We are as serious as we can get. We have enough proof to prove your financial dealings with the likes of Malfoy. If you don't cooperate, all the evidence we have amassed about your collusion with the captured Death Eaters will get into the Wizengamot and the Daily Prophet. When all is said and done, you'll be lucky not to be called a Death Eater. Damien threatened, loudly dumping a thick file on Fudge's table. Death Eater? Me? Fudge asked, gulping audibly. Should you do as we ask, these records will never come to light. You can quietly retire and lead an enjoyable life with no one bothering you. However, if you remain in the post of minister, you'll find yourself incarcerated in Azkaban for aiding the rise of a Dark Lord. Amir Shafiq threatened, glaring at the sweating Minister of Magic. Fudge looked helplessly at Amelia Bones, who only stared back at him coolly. You have no other moves left, Cornelius. It's time that you retire from the ministry, said Damien Greengrass. Dumbledore. Please help me. Fudge begged, turning to the old wizard in the room who so far had stayed silent and merely observed everyone quietly. Is this how you want to pursue this war, Harry? Serious? Do you think I'll stay a silent spectator as you overthrow the ministry in this manner? Dumbledore asked, staring down at everyone through his half-moon glasses with a disappointed look. On the contrary, that's exactly what you'll be doing, Albus Dumbledore, said Harry, looking coolly into the blue eyes of the headmaster of Hogwarts. You've stayed silent all these years as this corrupt ministry released some of the worst scum of this world into the open and declared them upstanding citizens. You've had nothing to say for over a decade as murderers, rapists, and criminals escaped justice while their victims starved for justice. You've remained silent as those same scum cropped up another generation of mini Death Eaters and sent them off to Hogwarts, where they continue to celebrate and profess the ideology that killed thousands of innocent people. Harry said coldly, moving close to Dumbledore, never taking his eyes off for a second. So, you'll stay silent now while I do what I must to clean up the mess you left, Dumbledore. You lacked the will to bring justice and thought to smother yourself under shadows. Unfortunately for you, I'm committed to exposing those shadows that you worked so tirelessly to conceal. And this is how you right the wrongs of the past, Harry? Dumbledore asked tiredly. Yes, by shining a little bit of light on you all. If it is becoming uncomfortable for you, that's only because you've been living for too long in the shadows. Harry retorted rather nonchalantly. The light spreads warmth and comfort, Harry. Not fear and despair. Dumbledore said sagely. Yes, indeed. But you forget the light also eradicates darkness, Professor. Those who have thrived in darkness for too long will find that the light burns them whole. Harry calmly countered. I tire of this conversation, Professor Dumbledore. Harry said before turning his sights on Cornelius Fudge, who looked like he was a minute away from having a heart attack. will you do as I ask, or are you brave enough to face Azkaban? I'll do as you all say. Fudge stuttered out, keeping his head bowed low. Good. Harry smiled, nodding at Damien to finish off everything so that no back doors were left open to challenge their decision. The first thing Damien did was call on the head of the Department of Mysteries, Saul Croker, to witness Fudge signing the declaration of a nationwide emergency followed by his resignation, thereby charging the head of the DMLE with emergency powers. All of this was completed in the swiftest manner possible, as time was of the essence. All the paperwork was done within half an hour, which conferred Amelia Bones with emergency powers until a new election could be called in a Wisengamot session. Harry waited patiently until Fudge vacated his seat, and Amelia Bones took the seat of the Minister for Magic. And that was it. It was now official. Amelia Bones was now the interim minister until fresh elections were called. If all went according to plan, Madame Bones would also become the next Minister for Magic. Now, then. I assume everyone is happy with what has transpired. Dumbledore spoke up after all the official ceremonies were finished. So far, yes. Maybe some biscuits and tea would have smoothed over the ceremony. Sirius quipped. I'll have that arranged in the next ceremony, Lord Black. Madame Bones commented. Wonderful. Now, Harry. You're out of bounds when you should have been sleeping soundly in the Gryffindor Tower. I believe you'll not protest when I ask you to return to your dorms, said Dumbledore. Naturally. Harry nodded at Dumbledore. Good, said Dumbledore before fishing out a sock from his robes and tapping it with the tip of his wand. Portus. The sock glowed a bright blue before settling down, and just like that, a portkey was created inside the Minister of Magic's office in violation of a plethora of laws. An illegal portkey? You created it inside the office of the minister with 2 senior heads of the departments of the ministry and several Wisengamot members as witnesses. You must be slipping in your old age, Albus. Saul Croker said, an admonishing look on his old face. Quite necessary, I'm afraid. With Voldemort out in the open, I don't believe it's wise to take Harry through the flu. A portkey to Hogwarts from the most secure room of the Ministry is the safest mode of transportation for Harry, no? Dumbledore said with twinkling eyes. Dumbledore has a point. The Aurors have yet to vet the flu network to see whether they were tampered with. Madame Bones also agreed with Dumbledore's portkey idea. Very well, said Harry, shrugging his shoulders. What about my friends? I'll send them over after you and Harry, please don't get into any more trouble. It's only a few hours, and you can leave Hogwarts to your home, said Dumbledore. I'll think about it. Harry quipped, taking the offered portkey. I shall see you in half an hour, Harry. Dumbledore muttered before moving a few paces back. 1, 2, 3. Harry felt the familiar sensation of a tugging in his gut as reality warped around him. But unlike the last time he used a portkey, Harry saw a bright golden sphere form around him, and soon, a myriad of colors appeared around him in the form of smoke. What the hell? Harry muttered in disbelief as he saw the smoke getting sucked into his jacket. Harry parted his cloak slightly and saw a time turner hanging loosely from his pocket, absorbing the golden light around him and spamming out a myriad of colors from its other side. He winced as the whooshing energy around him grew into a storm of colors, and he felt the brightly polished floor beneath him disappear. When the bright colors around him dimmed, Harry stood on a grassy hill surrounded by forest on all sides. The time turner continued to glow an eerie bright gold in his pocket while its many needles and rings continued to spin, making Harry worry. To make matters worse, he could see a slight crack in the glass holding some sand inside a small hourglass of the time turner. He did the only thing that made sense in the situation despite the growing fear that something had gone wrong in his mind. He applied a stasis charm on the time turner and kept it safely in the inner pocket of his jacket. Harry looked around the area bathed in moonlight but saw no familiarity. I think I'm stranded far away from Hogwarts in a good scenario. In the worst scenario. Harry shook his head, as such thoughts were not helpful in his situation. He could see a hill ahead of him that looked covered in grass, similar to the one he was standing on. Assuming his spirit form, Harry flew straight towards the hill and settled himself on its peak. The view he got once he settled on the hill was both comforting and troubling at the same time. Standing before Harry was the towering castle of Hogwarts in all its glory. But there was one glaring problem. He could see several globes of fireballs being thrown at the castle as if Hogwarts was under attack by some foe. Another disconcerting observation he made was that he could not find the village of Hogsmeade anywhere near the castle. Under the extraordinary circumstances he found himself in, only one thing came to Harry's mind. What the fuck is going on? Harry asked no one in particular, but he only heard the sound of crickets and the booming sound of the bombardment of Hogwarts Castle. Chapter 85, The Time Heist Part 2. What is the meaning of this, Dumbledore? Sirius snarled, holding Dumbledore up by the collar of his robes. What have you done with my godson? I swear on my parents' grave I didn't do anything to Harry. Please be calm so that we may study what happened and reverse the damage. Dumbledore pleaded. No, you twinkly-eyed bastard. You've meddled enough with our lives. I'm going to curse your head off. Sirius roared, brandishing his wand and pressing the glowing tip into Dumbledore's neck. But before a spell could be fired, a stunner slammed into Sirius' back, leaving the last Black unconscious. Dumbledore felt his feet touch the ground, gasping for air while he rubbed his sore throat. Thank you, Madam Bones. Dumbledore nodded gratefully at the newly charged interim minister for magic. Oh, don't thank me yet. I'm merely keeping Lord Black out of prison when we could use that space for you, Dumbledore, said Amelia Bones. Now tell me. What have you done with Mr. Potter? I don't know, Amelia. I swear I've not done anything nefarious with Harry, and never would I do so to any child. Dumbledore said earnestly. I believe Dumbledore is speaking the truth in this instance, Madam Bones. This is not Dumbledore's doing, said Saul Croaker, poking at the bubble of magical energy formed around a small space that used to contain Harry Potter. What do you mean? Asked Amelia with a frown, lowering her wand trained on Dumbledore. As I said, this is not a spell of Dumbledore's doing. At least, it's not entirely his doing. I received word from my colleagues in the department that the time chamber was smashed beyond repair. It looks like the Dark Lord unleashed the Fiendfire curse inside the premises. That's unfortunate. But what has that got to do with this spell? Amelia nodded at her room's slowly growing golden bubble of magical energy. It's not a spell, Madam Bones. It's an expanding tear in spacetime, powered by an infinite source of magic that'll consume this building and, in time, our whole world, said Saul Croaker with a grave look. Spacetime tear, you say? How can this be possible? What sort of spell could create something like this? Damian Greengrass asked with fear shining in his eyes. Not a spell, Lord Greengrass. Saul Croaker sighed. I suspect Mr. Potter was either doused in the time sand used in time turners or had a malfunctioning time turner on his person. When Dumbledore's portkey activated, the space occupied by Mr. Potter was moved sideways in time. The question is whether he went into the past or the future. What can we do to reverse this, Croaker? Amelia asked. We'll need another time turner, one powerful enough to reverse the damage in spacetime. We can create a containment field to render the space around the anomaly in a stasis temporarily. Then what are you waiting for? Let's reverse the damage done and retrieve Harry Potter. Amelia urged, but she got a bad feeling when Croaker remained grave. As I've said, the Dark Lord unleashed Fiendfire in the time chamber. There is nothing useful left in the chamber. Depending on several factors, we'll need to ask for aid from foreign ministries to loan a powerful time turner or even several time turners. Cracker explained. It'll be difficult to arrange for new time turners. They are a safely guarded secret of the ministries. Dumbledore started to say with a pessimistic look. I can have as many time turners you want to be arranged tonight itself. Damian butted in, addressing Croaker. Can you make sure Harry will return without any harm? If you can ensure the delivery of the time turners I require, I can reverse the spacetime anomaly. But Mr. Potter's safety depends on his survival in the past or the future he is currently inhabiting. I'm afraid you'll have to make arrangements should the worst come to pass. Croaker warned truthfully. We'll cross that bridge when the time comes. You are positive that you can retrieve Mr. Potter if you have a functioning time turner? Amelia asked. Yes. I'll need to call in my colleagues from the department, said Croaker. Then do it fast, Amelia said before turning her attention to Lord Greengrass. Lord Greengrass. If you need any help. I'll need an international port key to Dresden. Damien said immediately. You'll have it. Amelia nodded before she went straight for the fireplace in the office, connecting it immediately with the Department of Magical Transportation. Perhaps I can be of some aid, my boy. I do have some connections outside Britain. Dumbledore offered, looking imploringly at Damien. If I need any help, I'll be sure to ask for it, Headmaster Dumbledore. Damien said calmly. Damien. Go to level 6. Robert Skyver will help you reach Dresden, said Amelia. Thank you, said Damien before turning to leave. But he paused halfway towards the door. What about Lord Black? Damien asked hesitantly, looking at the unconscious form of Sirius lying on the floor. I'll take care of that. Go. Amelia urged the man. She immediately contacted the Aurors and had them track down Andromeda Tonks to make sure Sirius Black remained calm. Of course, she had to go over the circumstances that led to the unconscious state of Lord Black. The expanding glowing ball of magical energy in her office at least made the whole story more believable. By the time Amelia had explained the situation to Andromeda Tonks, Croaker's colleagues in the Department of Mysteries had gathered and started placing several wards and charms that isolated the sphere of energy. Do you think they can reverse what happened? Andromeda asked worriedly. I do not know. Amelia admitted. If the Unspeakables can't help Mr. Potter return, I'll ask for foreign aid. We are not the only Ministry of Magic in the world with knowledge over time and space. Do you think they'll help? They didn't aid us with the Dark Lord last time. Andromeda reminded her. That's because we were led by indecisive leaders. This time, it'll be different. Amelia promised. Even if she had concerns about accepting foreign aid in public for the sake of her political career, there were other avenues to receive help. The only downside was that once it got leaked to the public, it'd damage her far more than accepting aid in public. Her political opponents could launch a witch hunt against her and pin everything wrong with the ministry on her head. This was why she had only agreed with Lady Lilith to accept aid from her mercenaries instead of hit wizards registered with foreign ministries. If the mercenaries got exposed, she could disavow any direct involvement in their deployment. With the hit wizards, it'd be impossible to maneuver out of direct responsibility. But that point was moot now. Harry Potter was now beyond space and time. If word got out that the boy who lived went missing right after fighting Voldemort to a standstill, the public outcry would pull down her regime faster than she could blink. She'd end up losing the fight even before it began, and that could not be allowed to happen. It was as if the whole world had gone mad in a few minutes. One moment, Harry was bringing down Fudge and helping the ascension of Amelia Bones like in one of the most significant political coups Britain had seen. But now he was in a time and place that was alien to everything he knew, and most importantly, this whole new chapter of life that opened before him was something that made all his plans useless. He had never factored in time travel into the many plans he had constructed in his mind, therefore, his mind was a blank slate. He could only dumbly stare at the Hogwarts castle undergoing a siege like in the Middle Ages with siege engines. But strangely enough, magical attacks landed on the protective shield around the castle. He could tell because there were flashes of strange light impinging on the shield and fracturing it in places. Harry could see several large holes blown open on the barrier protecting Hogwarts. He immediately took his wand into his hand, determined to lend a hand in protecting the school from harm, but then he hesitated. If I interfere, I could destabilize the entire timeline. I should be a mute spectator and invisible to this time and its people. Harry decided. But there was another danger in that decision. It left him wholly separated at an unknown time without any help. If there was any chance of returning to his own time, he needed the help of the most knowledgeable wizards and witches of this time to make it possible. My knowledge of magic is lacking in deciphering the secrets of time travel on my own. I'll need help, Harry admitted to himself while staring at Hogwarts uncertainly. There was no telling whether the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore, or even his grandmother would succeed in helping from their side. Therefore, Harry was left with the prospect of seeking local help. Unfortunately, the best help he could think of right now was in the castle that was under siege. So, his choices were clear. He could either turn a blind eye to the world around him and hope the unspeakables managed to save him, or he could seek Hogwarts' help. A woman's scream suddenly captured Harry's attention. Since he wore the Horus glasses, he could make out a woman running out of a tree line. To his surprise, he saw a stave in the woman's hand with which she threw a curse blindly over her shoulder. One of the trees suddenly came alive, its roots and branches attacking something in the forest. Harry frowned as he stared at the witch dressed in grey robes running towards his direction. The stave in her hand made Harry worry that he was too far back in the past. Magical staves had gone out of fashion in the wizarding world for centuries. So, seeing a stave-wielding witch made Harry worry that he was too far back in time. Harry was startled when the witch fell with a cry, and he found the reason in the form of an arrow sticking out of her left knee. An arrow. Muggles? Harry frowned thoughtfully, staring at the tree-line with keen eyes. His eyes, however, widened when he saw several small creatures dressed in gleaming silver armor with wicked-looking axes in their hands. Goblins. Harry breathed, staring at the foot soldiers led by 5 mounted goblins. Is that wild boars they are riding? Harry wondered, looking at the mean-looking creatures mounted by the goblins. The mounted goblins atop the boars ordered something in gobbledygook, which made Harry remember that his modern English would probably stand out like a sore thumb. He was sure modern English was not around at a time when even Hogsmeade was absent. He was expecting Gaelic or even Scot to be the dominant language in the area. There was a chance Latin was a preferred language among some wizards and even nobles of the time. Thankfully, he had an easy remedy for the language barrier. Harry placed the Allspeak charm on himself before moving towards the downed woman. Bind the witch in magic suppression shackles. She'll be a nice amusement for the men in our camp, a mounted goblin ordered. But to Harry's surprise, the woman was no damsel in distress despite the arrow sticking out of her leg. The red-haired woman slammed the butt of her stave into the ground, generating a blast of magical energy. Harry hastily placed a shield before him to withstand the blasting spell. The land around tore apart under the force of the spell. It was as if someone had carved out a giant hole in the face of the earth. Most of the goblins close to the woman were blown to bits while the force of the spell smacked away the rest. Who are you? The woman turned her blazing green eyes on Harry with her stave raised threateningly. A traveler who thought you needed help. But I seem to have misjudged the situation, said Harry, bringing down the shield with a thought while eyeing the downed goblins warily. Do you need any help with that arrow? I do not, stranger, the woman growled, tapping her stave against the arrow, making it disappear into thin air. But Harry noticed the woman was not healing the wound on her leg, and she was losing blood. May I? Harry looked pointedly at her wound. You know to heal wounds made by goblin steel? The woman asked with a raised eyebrow. Harry remembered a portion of a half-forgotten lesson from Professor Bin's history class. Goblins used to coat their steel with poisons that were most harmful to wizards and witches in wars. Therefore, he understood why the woman was not treating the wound with simple healing spells that had closed the wound. She must be forcibly fighting off the effects of the poison with her magic and sheer will. Harry mused. No, I won't be able to treat the poison, but I can keep it contained in your leg and prevent it from spreading into other parts of your body. I know a spell to keep you safe until you can find a good healer to administer a proper antidote, said Harry truthfully. Now, may I? You may, the redhead woman said after a moment of scrutiny. Harry bent down to get a closer look at the wound. He looked hesitantly at the woman who slowly hiked up the hem of her grey robes, allowing him to see the wound. Harry held his palm hover over the wound, trying to sense malicious magic from the wound. There was a faint echo of destructive magic in the wound that made Harry assume it was some form of a mild poison. There's poison, but it's non-lethal. I suppose they were trying to take you hostage. Harry told the woman as he applied a stasis charm on the whole leg to keep it in suspended animation. That makes sense. The woman muttered but didn't elaborate. Either the woman was someone important enough to take hostage, or the goblins had certain nefarious intentions in capturing her alive. I've placed your leg in suspended animation. It'll regulate the flow of your blood, preventing the spread of the poison. I'll carry you to your destination. What is your name, traveler? The woman suddenly asked, making Harry flounder for a second. He couldn't use his real name because he feared changing things too much. I need an alternate name that'll have the least impact on the timeline. Something that could blend in. Harry thought. Suddenly, he remembered the name of one of the 5 good emperors of the Roman Empire. Hadrian. My name is Hadrian, he said, smiling at the witch while mentally patting himself on his back for a job well done. Only Hadrian, the woman asked with a raised eyebrow. Darn it. Family name. I need a family name that won't conflict with the future. Something unique. Harry fussed over in his head. Then, an idea came to his head, and he said the first fictional family name that came to his head. Targaryen. Hadrian Targaryen. Immediately after, he said that Harry felt like he made a mistake. Hadrian Targaryen, the red-headed woman slowly said, testing out his name with a thoughtful frown. You are not from the kingdom of Alba, are you? Raha-ah. A goblin warrior roared, swinging a wicked-looking axe aiming for Harry's head from behind. On instinct, Harry dived, pulling the witch with him. They rolled under the wild swing of the axe, and Harry quickly followed it up with the gouging curse. Defodio. Harry's aim was true as the gouging spell struck right between the eyes of the goblin. A straight cylindrical hole was punched through the head of the goblin, making it keel over dead with blood pooling beneath it. Filthy human! Scum! More goblins poured out of the forest with warcry on their lips and weapons in their hands. No! Harry said, placing his hand on the redhead woman's shoulder when she brandished her stave to perform a spell. The poison could spread fast if you weaken yourself magically. Let me deal with this. A line of goblins stayed back close to the tree-line and chose to release a sea of arrows high into the sky. Magical shields won't work. Their arrows can breach our shields, the woman warned him immediately. Don't worry. My spell is designed to combat goblin steel, said Harry. The advantage of time travel was that he had the edge when it came to certain spells that became sophisticated enough over the passage of time. Indomitus. A golden sphere of magical energy swirled into existence around Harry and the woman. The enchanted steel of the goblins harmlessly impinged on the shield and was consequently repelled away in quick order. Canceling the shield, Harry immediately launched a spell in his arsenal that had the scope to take out multiple opponents with precision. Tenitrum fulminata. A ray of pale white lightning blasted out of the tip of his wand before branching off into hundreds of miniature lightning bolts. The goblins and their armor were no match for the power of lightning. Thousands of volts of lightning energy arced through the goblin warriors in an instant. With no magical defense, their bodies fried instantly under the onslaught of his lightning spell, turning them into charred corpses within minutes. You'll suffer for this, human. After this, there'll be no peace but only war and death between us. A goblin groaned from the ground who had miraculously survived. Because of the lack of burn marks on the goblin's body, Harry assumed the goblin was a survivor of the witch's spell. That was a mistake. You could have lived had you remained silent, Harry said coolly. He conjured a metal spike and banished it straight into the goblin's head, silencing the creature forever. We must leave this place and seek refuge inside the walls of Hogwarts. More of them will be coming towards us, the red-haired witch warned Harry, heaving herself over using her stave as a crutch. I'll carry you to the castle. It'll be better if you're not moving that leg, said Harry. When he was sure the woman was not showing any protest, Harry gathered her up bridal style and slowly walked towards the castle. Forgive me for not asking. What's your name? Harry asked the beautiful woman in his arms. I'm Rowena Ravenclaw. Harry had to exercise all his willpower to not react in sheer surprise. He looked closely at the face of the woman in his arms, and she didn't look anything remotely similar to Helena Ravenclaw. There was also the possibility that the woman was lying. But he couldn't think of any reason for someone to impersonate Rowena Ravenclaw, least of all before him. The fact that he was carrying Rowena Ravenclaw made him silent throughout the rest of their journey. His mind was whirling with possibilities and the dangers of discovery as well. Ravenclaw was a beautiful woman but renowned for an even more beautiful mind. This was the same mind that birthed the Room of Requirement and the enchanted ceiling of Hogwarts. A single misstep by him could jeopardize the entire future. Therefore, he felt it was better to keep his silence and think things through while he had the time. The closer he got to Hogwarts, the sounds of the bombardment became more pronounced. At least, the siege's sounds had the effect of distracting Rowena Ravenclaw from scrutinizing him further. "Stop here." Rowena suddenly spoke up. "We are at the edge of the wards. I must open the wards to grant you entry within its protection." Harry nodded and carefully set Rowena on her good leg. She leaned on her stave and carefully moved a few feet forward. "Tell me, Hadrian Targaryen? Why have you come to Hogwarts?" Rowena suddenly asked. "I ask because I want to know whether you are a threat. I seek the greatest treasure known to man in Hogwarts. Knowledge. If you're willing to share that, then allow me entry," said Harry. Rowena remained contemplative for a moment before tapping the wards with her stave. "You are welcome to share the hearth of Hogwarts, Hadrian Targaryen." The wards and barriers surrounding Hogwarts flickered into existence near Rowena. "Come," Rowena said before stepping inside the ward. Harry took a deep breath, gathering himself before he followed Rowena Ravenclaw into the protection of Hogwarts. He hoped he was not going to screw things up. Chapter 86, Meeting the Founders. "I meant to ask this earlier. What is that strange thing on your nose?" Rowena asked, an inquisitive frown on her face while looking at the glasses on Harry's face. "Oh, this? It helps me see more accurately. I have trouble seeing with clarity, you see," said Harry, tapping the glasses on his nose. "You are blind without these glasses?" Rowena asked curiously. "I'm not blind. I have poor eyesight, and these glasses improve my vision. That's all," Harry explained. "I see. You are not from around here at all, are you?" said Rowena. Harry merely smiled at Rowena instead of dignifying that with a response that'd undoubtedly land him in a heap of trouble. Instead, Harry diverted the conversation to a more relevant topic as he carried the Hogwarts founder into the castle. "Why are the goblins attacking the castle? Why were you even so far away from the castle?" Harry asked, taking an unfamiliar flight of stairs that led to a giant oak door. "The Goblin King Sabretooth wants to carve out a kingdom of his own in this place. Hogwarts will pose a threat to his plans if we educate the wizards and witches to fight back. Shouldn't they see the Muggles as more of a threat than wizards and witches? After all, there are more of them than us," Harry pointed out. "I take it you've never encountered the goblins before. They are not exactly the brightest bunch. All they want is a good fight, and whenever a new king is crowned, they'll launch an assault on wizarding settlements," Rowena said with a huff. "I see." Harry nodded. With a flick of his wand, he unlocked the door. He could hear the locks coming undone one by one on the other side. "I was sent to negotiate with King Sabretooth. It was a desperate attempt to stop the bloodshed, but I suppose it was a wasted effort from the start expecting such bull-headed creatures to see reason," said Rowena, a look of disgust on her unblemished face. "Sometimes, war is the only path to peace," said Harry, opening the doors wide with his magic. "Wise words, stranger. Now, who are you?" Harry was immediately on the business end of a long stave with a glowing crystal at the tip. A bearded, bulky man was holding the stave, glaring at him threateningly. "Enough, Godric. He saved me from the goblins. I owe him, and I can vouch for him," Rowena said immediately, pushing the stave away from Harry's face. "Is he a—" "Yes, Godric. He is a wizard. Now, can we please go? I need Helga's aid, Rowena said in an annoyed manner. Are you injured? Godric asked in concern. A goblin arrow struck her leg. I've placed her leg in stasis. The poison will be slow to spread, but she'll need the antidote before the wound is healed, said Harry, struggling to keep a straight face standing before Godric Gryffindor. Come inside. I'll lead you to Helga. Godric let them inside while tapping his stave on the floor. Harry could feel the raw power of magical energy from the illustrious Hogwarts founder even though the spell was merely to lock the door. You are finely attuned to magic, aren't you? Rowena asked, staring at his face with discerning eyes. Harry didn't say anything and focused on following Godric inside the castle. Your mastery over magic is almost uncanny for a young wizard. I don't believe I've seen anyone so eloquently bend lightning to their will. Rowena commented. Lightning. Godric looked at Harry with an impressed look. Yes, Godric. He used a lightning spell to kill the goblins attacking us. Impressive. Godric nodded in a respectful manner. You look a tad younger. What's your name, and how old are you? I'm Hadrian Targaryen, and I'm 16 years old. Harry lied through his teeth with ease. While the conventional times were pretty much lax on age restrictions, he didn't know how the founders viewed the world during this time. The founders were portrayed as the prime movers of the wizarding community of Scotland during this era. So, they must have had a standard in accepting students. According to the Ministry of Magic, the age of majority under normal conditions for a wizard or a witch was 17. Unfortunately, he was aware his body didn't have the physique close to an ordinary 17-year-old boy, nor did he have substantial facial hair to pass off as older than he looked. Therefore, he hedged his bets on passing off as a 16-year-old. Going by the lack of reaction from the two founders, he supposed he nailed it. Lightning spells at such a young age. Godric looked appreciatively at Harry. You must have had quite a skilled master. Harry didn't vocally respond to the comment, poised to dig into his past. Therefore, he merely nodded while thinking up more lies for short-term use until he properly grasped the situation in Hogwarts. But Harry didn't get the time to cook up a false story in his head on the fly as his senses went haywire, making him stop walking. It was as if his entire being screamed at him with such urgency as if he was about to die. What the hell? Harry muttered confusedly as the feeling slipped away from his senses. When he looked at the founders, he saw Godric and Rowena signaled at him to remain silent. Harry gripped the holly wand, feeling the tension in the air. He slowed his breathing rapidly while occluding his mind to sharpen his focus. He could see some sort of danger afoot in the area, but it was as if the danger was also expert at hiding from his senses. Suddenly, a section of the roof collapsed, forcing Harry to backpedal. But from the ceiling, a giant golden head of a vicious-looking lion emerged, and it promptly roared. The force of the roar forced Harry to his knees while his ears started ringing, and all over his body, he felt as if miniature blades were spearing into his bones. A rush of warmth suddenly enveloped him, making Harry gasp as if he was breathing for the first time. It's the roar of a chimera. You managed to stay conscious without a magical shield in between. Rowena commented randomly, her stave churning out a warm golden glowing shield that allowed Harry to regain his wits from the attack. This is not the time and place to study and observe magic, Rowena. Godric Gryffindor grunted. I shielded my mind, said Harry, pointing his wand at the most fearsome creature in the magical world right after an adult Nunduin Thunderbird. A shield around your mind? That's a brilliant piece of magic. Rowena said, straining a little as her shield flickered as the chimera launched another roar. This time, Harry acted on instinct and put up a shield. He could feel tiny needles of energy pushing against the shield he created, desperately trying to breach the barrier. His eyes widened as his senses screamed at him, warning of another impending danger. Pouring more power into his shield, Harry braced for the next attack. It came in the form of a golden snake, opening its mouth and spitting out bright gold fire. Of course. A chimera has a snake as its tail. Harry thought. The snake blasted more fire at Godric and Rowena, forcing them to defend themselves from the onslaught. A chimera has 6 eyes because it has 3 heads. Therefore, attacking a chimera and forgetting the defense is futile. The solution is to create a blind spot. Harry thought. Harry windlessly performed Serpensortia and cast an enlarging charm on the snake in quick order. Attack the chimera. Kill it, Harry ordered in Parseltongue. The enormous cobra lunged into action, which was enough to distract the tail of the chimera, giving some breathing room for Harry as Godric and Rowena were appropriately distracting the lion and goat heads of the beast. Harry allowed his shield and used a spell targeting the snake head. Suffusio. A torrent of water jumped from the tip of his wand and smashed into the chimera. But it hardly damaged the beast, which was to be expected. However, he followed it up with a spell that made the chimera regret not escaping when it had the chance. Pruin Ventus. Gales of frosty wind bellowed out of his wand, turning the water he used earlier into ice. The chimera's movements became sluggish as frost formed all over its body. Harry could see the lion head was almost entirely frozen dead as it had stopped moving altogether, but the snake head managed to burn away the snake he conjured. But before the snake head could burn away the frost, Godric removed the snake head with his sword out of nowhere. When Harry blinked again, Godric had stabbed his sword through the goat head of the chimera with the tip of the blade protruding from its frosted lion head. To Harry's relief, the monstrous form of chimera fell dead with a distinct thud that shook the floor. A young wizard proficient in elemental magic and conjuring with the ability to speak to snakes. Godric muttered, a shadow falling on his face as he scrutinized Harry with his brown eyes. Are you an illegitimate child of Salazar? Harry gaped at the founder of his house for a moment, but he was spared from saying anything when he saw Rowena Ravenclaw collapse. Arresto momentum. Rowena's fall was arrested by the slowing charm he cast. The spell probably helped save the founder from getting a nasty concussion. She needs Helga's help, said Godric, taking the fallen staff from the ground. Harry applied the levitation charm on Rowena that floated her prone body in mid-air. Then let's go fast. If the wards have been breached, it'll be better to fight as a group, said Harry, which earned him a strange look from Godric. Follow me, said Godric, running ahead with Harry closely following with Rowena floating alongside. Harry found it all surreal that he was walking amongst the Hogwarts founders, and by the looks of the incomplete corridors, classrooms, and sculptures, he had a feeling Hogwarts was still under construction. Strangely enough, he wished Hermione was with him in this adventure. Her expertise in the written history of the Founders' era would have been immensely useful for him. But that was spilt milk under the bridge. He hoped the Ministry and his family back home had better luck reversing his time travel problem. With the godforsaken siege going on against Hogwarts, his first priority was to survive the siege and, along the way, befriend the Founders so that they'd later be amicable to help him return to his time. You are telling me that my grandson is lost within the folds of time somewhere in the past or the future? Paranel said, keeping her voice deadly cold, devoid of a hint of emotion. Damien could feel pinpricks on the back of his neck as he felt the tension in the room. I'm afraid so, my lady. Croker believes the battle in the Department of Mysteries must have left a stray damaged time-turner on Harry's person. So, when Dumbledore gave Harry the portkey, I gave you a simple task, Damien. Do you remember what the task was? Paranel asked coolly, cutting off the explanation Damien was making. You ordered us to keep Harry safe from Dumbledore, my lady. Damien muttered, keeping his head bowed low. And is he? No, my lady. You became blinded by power that was nearly in your grasp. You forgot your duty in your haste to consume the factions inside the Wisengamot. Paranel accused. My lady, Harry fought the Dark Lord to a standstill and even cut off the man's arm from his shoulders. When I met Harry, I only looked for injuries from the battle, but he never sustained any. It was a misjudgment on my part, but Croker assures me that he can bring back Harry if he can gain access to a powerful time-turner. We'll see, Damien. You'll have as many time-turners as the unspeakables in Britain want. But if they can't rescue my grandson, I'll be coming for you. Keep that in mind. Paranel warned. Within half an hour, Paranel arranged the time-turners from the German ministry. Of course, she didn't hand over the time-turners alone. She also had the most competent authority in time turners sent to Britain to ensure her grandson safely escaped the time anomaly. I warned you something like this could happen to the boy. Magic herself does not wish for what you intend to happen. She will fight you every step of the way. Nicholas whispered from the shadows. Perenelle scoffed before lighting the chimney with fire that chased away the darkness in her room, revealing her husband. Perhaps it's the will of magic to fade into nothingness like the elder races. But I won't allow that to transpire. Wizards and witches are the inheritors of this world, not the Muggles. As Antonish Peveril dreamed, the Hallows will become one, and the Muggles will face judgment when the clock strikes millennium, no matter the hurdles that come my way. This is inevitable, Perenelle said firmly. She could hear a deep sigh let out by her husband. I do not like the path you've taken, Perenelle. But I won't stop you since you have given me time to try my hand at uniting our worlds. Sadly, I failed. Nicholas shook his head. However, I advise you to inform the child what you intend for him soon. He has an inkling, Perenelle said with a scoff. The only reason he has yet to give me access to the chamber was because he wanted to find out what I wanted in the first place. Why do you think I let him take his merry time? Still, it'll be better if he hears it from your mouth. Perenelle grunted. She supposed it was time for her grandson to at least understand his destiny. As soon as he returns, a talk will be necessary. Perenelle mused. Helga Hufflepuff must be the most powerful healer in the history of the world. Harry mused. He could not think of any sorcerer with the power and skill to draw out poisons from blood and healing wounds using wandless magic. Harry strongly suspected Helga Hufflepuff had a unique magical ability that helped her heal this fast. Otherwise, her capabilities didn't make much sense. Harry watched quietly as Lady Hufflepuff held her hand against the wounded leg of Rowena. Her hand remained on the leg for less than a minute, but the skin was unblemished when she took back her hand. The arrow wound on the leg had closed up, leaving not even a scar. The most impressive part was that Lady Hufflepuff did not even use potions to counteract the poison in Rowena's bloodstream. Instead, she drew it out with magic like it was a walk in the park. I take it you're suitably impressed by Helga's skill as a healer? Rowena asked with a grin as she sat up on her bed. I've never heard of a sorcerer capable of drawing out poisons without the aid of a foci like a wand or a stave. You must be the most gifted healer in the world, Harry admitted, staring at the auburn-haired witch with wide eyes. I have what you'd call the skill to enchant anything I touch with my magic. So long as my skin is in contact, I can reverse any damage done at the expense of my magic. Lady Hufflepuff explained. I've never heard of such an ability manifesting in anyone, Harry said honestly, already in awe of the woman. Neither has any one of us until we met Helga, Godric said. Harry was the next patient on Lady Hufflepuff's list. The older witch placed both hands on either side of his head. He could feel a pulse of energy passing through his body as Lady Hufflepuff began healing him from the injuries he sustained from battling the Chimera. One by one, his joints started to click back in place, and the strain Harry was feeling on his shoulders eased as Helga Hufflepuff's magic enveloped him from head to toe. You are inflicted with a curse of a dark nature. Right here, Lady Hufflepuff said, sweeping the bangs covering his forehead to the side as she stared at the lightning bolt scar etched on his skin. I know. Unfortunately for you, that one is beyond even your abilities, Lady Hufflepuff, said Harry. I'll be the judge of that, said Helga Hufflepuff after staring at him for a few seconds with her onyx eyes. Her eyes scrunched together in concentration as she tried to undo the curse clinging to the scar. Despite strenuous efforts on her part, the curse remained whole and bound to the scar. As I said, this is beyond your abilities. You should focus on your other patients, Harry advised, removing her hands from his head while standing up from the bed he was sitting on. There is no curse, poison, or wound that I can't undo, said Lady Hufflepuff, becoming flustered as she stared at his scar. Except this one. Harry smiled at the older witch. I thank you for healing me. I'll need to study this curse more closely. Not now, Helga. Godric said firmly before turning his sights on Harry. Hadrian Targaryen. I know this is much to ask from a traveler, but we are severely outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Your skill in magic is commendable from what I saw while battling the Chimera. Will you help Hogwarts in defending families and children from this war? Godric asked seriously. I'd be honored to fight alongside you all, said Harry, making the illustrious founder of his house grin. Very good. Welcome to Hogwarts. Godric patted on Harry's shoulder appreciatively. Thank you, Hadrian, said Rowena. It's time you met another one of our friends, Salazar Slytherin. He oversees the castle's defenses. It's entirely possible you might know him or even related to him by blood. After all, you are both Parselmouth, said Godric. That doesn't mean they are related. There must be many wizards and witches with that ability. Rowena argued. Harry remained silent as Godric and Rowena argued back and forth as his mind was otherwise engaged. Out of all the founders, he knew Salazar Slytherin far better. While the Slytherin never left any memoirs, several of his works survived in the chamber. Therefore, he knew the land upon which Hogwarts was built was the ancestral land of the Slytherin family for generations. The chamber only held his writings on magical fields of study that he found interesting. But from those writings, Harry could understand Salazar Slytherin was a wizard of extraordinary caliber. Throughout his century-long life, the man managed to gift many great magical discoveries that empowered wizardkind in the future. Most of them were in the field of potions, rituals, and charms. But what interested him most was how Slytherin developed all those potions and rituals. He was sure beyond doubt Parseltongue was involved in the process as it had a deep connection to old magic. Unfortunately, he had no concrete proof or details on the processes involved. Salazar had almost as if painstakingly done everything in his power to keep all information about Parseltongue from his written works that survived in the chamber. Or it could be that future descendants of Salazar took the works based on Parseltongue out of the chamber. There was also the interesting fact that the Hollow Earth theory was a reality and deeply connected to those carrying Peveril blood. If his stay during the Founders' era were to be extended, Harry intended to learn everything he needed to know about Elysium from Salazar Slytherin himself. At least, he hoped he could convince the wizard to share those details. And Harry finally saw the illustrious founder of Hogwarts watching over the battlefield from a tower. Salazar Slytherin was as tall as Godric Gryffindor, but the wizard had no hair on his head. Slytherin was dressed in dark robes while holding a stave with a snake head at one end. Salazar. Godric. Rowena. Slytherin acknowledged without taking his eyes from the battlefield. I take it the goblins refused our peace proposal. They want war, said Rowena. We'll give them one that they'll never forget. Slytherin said darkly before pointing a finger at Harry. But tell me, who's this guest you've brought inside Hogwarts? My name is Hadrian Targaryen. I came across this battlefield and found Rowena injured near the forest. If you'll have me, I'll lend you my power to win this war. Slytherin said nothing and merely observed Harry with keen onyx eyes. We'll see whether you are useful or just another one of those useless rabble cowering inside my castle. Slytherin said harshly before turning his sights on the enemy ahead. Harry didn't react to the barb, nor did he feel slighted the least bit as he understood why Slytherin said that. He had seen many wizards and witches hiding inside the castle without doing anything worth their while to defend the castle. He also remembered most witches and wizards were weak morons hardly able to defend against even muggles of this era. Instead, he focused on the goblin army arrayed outside Hogwarts. He supposed it'd be interesting to fight against goblins as he had only read about goblin wars in books. The chance to engage the goblins in a battle was something he looked forward to. After all, he had always wanted to test some spells, and the goblins were giving him the opportunity. He was not going to waste it. Chapter 87, In for a penny, in for a pound. Harry levitated the rubble out of the way, blocking a corridor. The roof had collapsed on the corridor, probably by the siege engines of goblins. He could see a massive stone inscribed with runes among the rubble. The rock looked like it had come out of a scorching furnace. Most of the runes inscribed were blackened out after breaching the wards surrounding Hogwarts. He became curious about the runes used by the goblins. While the runes were burned out, a chunk of the stone was missing, and he used his sensory abilities to get a feel for ambient magic in the runes. Unfortunately, he received mixed results. The magic lingering on the stone gave him only vague intent to grind, shield and pierce. He could have pieced that together without even looking at the rock. The barriers surrounding Hogwarts are empowered to burn away foreign hostile magic. Rarely anything survives once it comes in contact with the barriers. Harry looked over his shoulder to see Rowena Ravenclaw, dressed in fine blue silk, strutting towards him with her staff in hand. "I thought you were asked to take bed rest by Lady Hufflepuff," said Harry. "And you believe yourself to be far too clever than everyone else, don't you?" said Rowena, her eyes sharpened as she scrutinized him. "Why would you think so?" Harry asked, taken back by the suspicious look the Hogwarts founder was throwing at him. "I'd been carefully analyzing everything that happened since I met you in the forest, and two things stood out." "Is that so?" "Let's hear it then," said Harry, forcing his body to relax a little bit, but his magic was spreading out of his body, looking for any threats around him. "You have so far avoided saying anything about your homeland despite repeated inquiries, which means you're probably on the run or a spy. Second, you've shown you're terribly misinformed about goblins, which does not happen to wizards and witches in the Isle. So, you're from a distant land with little to no exposure to goblins or a spy sent by the goblins. Or maybe, I come from a place where goblins are nasty little buggers but don't wage war on wizards and witches," Harry retorted. "And what place is that, Hadrian Targaryen?" "Rome. Because I've been to Rome and never heard of a wizarding family named Targaryen," Rowena said, scowling at him while keeping her staff at the ready. Harry knew he was in a bind as he had not considered a specific area as his homeland. He thought he could wing it by passively projecting himself as a Roman or Greek, but that idea was now useless. Under pressure, he spouted out the first name of a place that came to his mind. "Valyria." "What?" Rowena asked, staring at him with a raised eyebrow. Harry felt like palming his face but resisted the urge by sheer will. No choice but to roll with it. Harry thought. "Valyria is my homeland. It's an island city near Greece's western coast. It's a city made by 14 great sorcerers 5 centuries ago. To this day, those 14 families administer the city, forming the Dragon Council of Valyrian Freehold." Harry made up a backstory, heavily drawing from a fictional book on the spot. "Name these 14 families," Rowena demanded sharply, still eyeing him suspiciously. "Valyrian, Vagar, Meraxes, Vermithor, Syrax, Caraxes, Tessarian, Malays, Tyraxes, Arrax, Sunfire and Targaryen. You happy now?" Harry thanked his lucky stars he was obsessed with House Targaryen and their dragons in the past. Otherwise, he'd have floundered for names. The dragon names of House Targaryen were the perfect cover for the lie he was spinning. However, he also understood he was weaving a web of lies, and sooner or later, he would get caught up in it if he was not careful enough. But for now, he had no choice but to proceed. In for a penny, in for a pound. Harry thought. "I've never heard of this place before," Rowena said suspiciously, but Harry noticed her stance relaxed slightly. "I'd be surprised if you've heard of it. Valyrian Freehold is a city exclusively for magical beings. Our ancestors built the city to avoid getting embroiled in Muggle wars exacerbated by the rapid expansion of the Roman Empire," said Harry, turning his focus back to repairing the damage inflicted on the roof. Harry unleashed his magical power and let it blanket the whole area before he applied the repairing charm. The wide area effect of the charm started a chain reaction that reassembled the broken roof from all the rubble lying around. Within half a minute, the collapsed roof reassembled itself in pristine condition. "That's impossible. No magic could shield an entire island from the eyes of Muggles," Rowena argued. At this point, Harry realized the founders had most probably not developed Muggle-repelling wards or even unplottable wards that secured magical communities inside Muggle settlements. In History of Magic taught at Hogwarts, he had learned the founders created the Muggle-repelling wards and other illusion charms that kept Hogwarts as a rundown old castle to the Muggle eyes. There were also some popular questions about why the founders built a school for children so close to the forbidden forest filled with dangerous creatures. Harry now understood why. The founders used the dangerous creatures in the forest as a buffer against Muggles. They must have created the Muggle-repelling wards after Hogwarts was built. Harry mused. There are charms that can shield entire tracts of land from Muggles. The Freehold uses it most extensively. My family had developed even a charm to ward off the Freehold from even foreign magical creatures and wizards. Harry claimed. Is that true? Is there magic capable of hiding lands under wards even from wizards and magical creatures? Rowena asked excitedly. Of course. I'll be happy to share it with you to protect Hogwarts, said Harry. And that offer clinched Rowena Ravenclaw, smashing through the doubts plaguing her mind. At least, Harry hoped that was the case because he was winging it with his backstory, and now he was in uncharted territory. He also felt the founders would not be of much help in solving his crisis. Still, he hoped to use the founders and their knowledge to his advantage to get back to his time without disclosing his true identity. He just had to come up with a good story. Harry had spent the rest of the night helping the inhabitants of Hogwarts and cleaning up the wreckage from the siege. For some reason, the goblins had stopped their attacks against Hogwarts. Whatever the reason behind the abrupt stopping of the siege, the people huddled inside Hogwarts were immensely thankful, as was Harry. With everything falling quiet for the night, Harry had the opportunity to observe the refugees inside Hogwarts properly. There were some 30-odd wizarding families taking refuge in the castle. Of those 30 families, only 10 wizards and witches pitched in to help with the castle's defense. The sad fact was that most of them were too young and some of the first students of the founders. So they were not as knowledgeable. Aguamenti. A jet of water blasted out of the tip of his wand, dousing the flames burning the window. Harry transfigured a stray piece of wood into a metallic square plate the exact size of the window. Using the sticking charm, he fixed the plate on the window to close off a potential place the enemy could infiltrate in the worst-case scenario. You're so fast at casting spells, Lord Targaryen, said Kieran, with stars in his eyes. Harry grunted, moving ahead to look for any other damage to the castle. Kieran Flanagan was a boy of 12 who took a fancy to hang around him, and due to the lies he spun with Rowena, he became a lord within the span of an hour. I guess rumors spreading like wildfire is a tradition that started from the Founders' era. Harry reflected with some amusement that made him grin. Or he was not giving Rowena the benefit of the doubt. His well-dressed attire might have given a noble or lordly impression to the wizards and witches dressed in rags and animal skin. Harry was fortunate to have dressed in dragonhide boots, a basilisk skin cloak and jacket, a cotton shirt and dark pants. Of course, there was trouble waiting for him as he had not carried anything on his person that translates to wealth in the time he found himself in. He was sure that would bring trouble upon his head, but he possessed a small pouch of gold and silver. However, the coins were few, not enough to cover an extended stay. They say you slew goblins by summoning lightning from the sky. Is it true? Kieran asked, keeping up pace with Harry's long strides. The kid is persistent. I'll give him that. Harry mused, eyeing the young brown-haired wizard out of the corner of his eyes. Summoning lightning from the sky is beyond me. But yes, I used a lightning spell to dispatch some goblin warriors. Harry answered, knowing the kid would not give him peace of mind if he remained mute for too long. That's so wonderful. I'd have loved to watch that, but my mother refuses to let me help in the war effort. Kieran complained, his eyes darkened suddenly. Even after what they did to my father, she won't let me. A mother's love for her children is the most powerful force in the world and, therefore, the most revered even by magic. Great feats of magic have been done by those who loved fiercely. So, do not despair for what you have, Kieran. Its value is incalculable, said Harry. I suppose. Kieran said morosely. But I want to fight. And you will, in time. There will be many wars to fight in your lifetime. I guarantee you that. First, learn to harness the magic within you. You have to learn to walk before you can run. Then, will you teach me? Kieran asked eagerly. Aren't you a student of Hogwarts? Why would you need my tutelage when you have 4 of the finest teachers in these lands? Harry asked with a raised eyebrow. They don't teach us anything of war. Lady Hufflepuff taught us how to heal injuries, grow plants, and brew potions. How's any of that useful when the goblins attack? I want to protect my mother. Harry was taken aback by the resolve shining in the boy's eyes. It was almost like seeing a reflection of himself in that moment, which made Harry give in. All right. I'll give you some tutelage, Harry said to the excitement of Kieran Flanagan. Harry was not blindly jumping into any commitment out of a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was all but sure that his stay at this time would get extended a bit. While he was here, it behoved him to share some of his knowledge with Hogwarts so that the founders would not be reluctant to share theirs. After all, a bridge has to be used from both sides, Harry thought. Harry spent the rest of the short time he had to instruct his new student in casting the stunning charm in between cleaning up the northern parts of the castle. When he was finally done, Harry was relieved there was no trace of the enemy or hostile magical creatures unleashed by the goblins hiding in the northern parts of the castle. When he finally returned to the hall where the families were camping, it was time for dinner, and the 4 founders were also there. Dinner was a silent affair, which Harry was not used to in Hogwarts. The Great Hall was usually brimming with the excited murmurings and jokes of students from all 4 houses. To sit in the Great Hall and not experience the sensory overload of hundreds of teenagers was disconcerting for Harry. Not to mention, the food was abhorrent. Harry was used to rich, spicy food in Hogwarts, especially some smoked beef, mashed potatoes, or even some tasty chicken soup. Whatever soup was currently on his plate was something he could not identify. But he couldn't complain as everyone was eating the same food. Right. Scotland's cuisine during this time can't be expected to come close to 20th century Scottish cuisine, Harry mused, taking a spoonful of soup into his mouth. Lord Hadrian. I'm not really a lord, Harry interrupted Salazar Slytherin. I was told your family was a noble family from a distant island ruled by 14 noble families. Salazar looked at him with an unimpressed look. My family is what your people would call a noble house, but I'm not a lord. My father Aegon holds the title, and after his time, my eldest sister Visenya shall inherit the title as per Valyrian custom, Harry carefully said, neatly following the backstory he had painstakingly crafted after much internal debate. Painting himself as a spare heir also had the added advantage of explaining his long journey away from his home island. Without the responsibility associated as the heir, he was free to roam the world, giving him the perfect cover. It also neatly disassociated from any formal nonsense that could rear its head in the future. Slytherin grunted but didn't say anything else but observe Harry closely. It's fascinating that wizards came together to build a city. Most of our people never see eye to eye on any matter, Godric commented. I imagine it was no easy task. But the 14 were convinced to take as many magical families away from the constant war of muggles. Since then, we've had 5 centuries of peace on our island while Europe bleeds under Roman greed for power. How did your people keep yourself unseen all these years? Helga Hufflepuff asked curiously. Our people realized early on the Roman fleet could find our island as it's located between Rome and Greece. So, our ancestors designed a ward that turned the whole island unploatable for muggles and magicals alike. Then, there is the muggle-repelling charm that encompasses the island's shores for added protection, making it inaccessible for ships to access our waters, Harry explained. Muggle-repelling charm? Salazar asked with renewed interest, steepling his fingers as he stared at Harry with unbridled curiosity. It's a charm that specifically targets the minds of muggles to ignore an area warded by the charm. It'll make them unable to see the warded area and deflect the attention of their mind. That's an impressive piece of magic. I've been thinking of a spell that could be something along those lines. Can you share this spell with us for Hogwarts protection? Salazar asked eagerly. We, of course, understand if it's a secret of your people, Godric started to say, but Harry cut off the man. I'll be happy to share the spells with you. Your efforts to safeguard wizards and witches and empower them through knowledge is commendable. I'll be happy to help in any way I can to safeguard Hogwarts. Harry readily offered. This is heartening to hear. You've our heartfelt gratitude, Hadrian. Helga Hufflepuff graced him with a radiant smile. Harry nodded at the older witch with a smile. Your spells are far different than I assumed, Salazar said, staring at the rising sun from the top of a tower. Our spells were designed with wands in mind. Our people have abandoned using staves, said Harry, joining Slytherin in watching the sunset. How many in your home island speak the noble tongue of serpents? Salazar asked in Parseltongue. Only those with Targaryen blood. Harry answered. Slytherin showed no reaction to his Parseltongue ability, which Rowena or Godric mentioned to the man at some point. If Valyria is a secure island, why have you left its safety? Salazar asked. Because Hadrian is adventurous like me. Isn't that so, friend? Godric laughed boisterously, clapping Harry on his shoulder. I wish that were the case, Godric, said Harry, sticking to the made-up story he had prepared beforehand. Truth be told, I wouldn't have ventured out of the island for an adventure. Our people are facing an unprecedented threat, and I was assured the answer to our problem lies in the British Isles. What do you seek? Perhaps we can help you. Rowena offered. I seek knowledge of time magic, Harry answered. He was not surprised to see the total bewilderment on the faces of the four founders. But he was disappointed because he had hoped they'd show some familiarity with the subject. Time magic? What's that? Godric asked curiously. It's the magic that exerts power over time and perhaps space. Theoretically, time magic could bend space and time. It could reverse an event after it happened or empower a wizard to move backwards or forward in time. Harry explained, gaining only fascinating looks from the founders. I had never thought of such a magic. Salazar muttered, looking at Harry with intrigue. Why do you want the power to control time? What sort of threat does your home island face that you require dominance over time? Rowena asked. That's a long tale, and one I don't think most would readily believe, said Harry. Then that tale will have to wait. Our enemy is getting ready to attack, said Salazar, capturing everyone's attention. Harry was a little relieved for the distraction as he didn't want to lay out all his backstory in one go. That was a classic way to fuck things up down the road. It was better to treat everyone with doses of his backstory for authenticity. Or maybe I'm overplanning this whole stuff. They look like they are eating out of the palm of my hand. Harry thought, bucking up a little as he dosed himself with some self-confidence. I'm good at making up stuff. I got this. Harry said to himself in the confines of his mind. But his attitude changed when he looked at the goblin army arrayed against Hogwarts. Oh, I'm so fucked. Harry thought, staring at the four massive dragons facing Hogwarts. Dragons! Helga Hufflepuff breathed, staring at the battlefield with wide eyes. There are 4 of them, Salazar. Rowena said worriedly. I know. I can see the battlefield, Rowena. Salazar muttered, glaring at the dragons as if the man was willing them away with his eyes. Well, I say we slay them all. I could use some dragonhide armor. Godric said giddily, looking rather eager to battle the dragons compared to the others in the tower. Do you not see what Sabretooth is planning, Godric? That horrid creature wants to shift our attention to the dragons so that he can attack the barriers that protect Hogwarts in earnest, said Rowena. Ah, but Sabretooth is discounting our new friend here, said Godric, placing his hand on Harry's shoulder. While we confront the dragons, Hadrian can hold the wards together, protecting the castle. Harry was somewhat stunned by the level of trust Godric was showing. Entrusting the keys to wards to someone was a sign of great trust. Trusting the wrong person with such an honor would also undo everything, like what happened to the Potters. He was not the only one stunned into silence by Godric Gryffindor's show of trust. The other founders looked apprehensively at each other. Salazar. I trust in Godric's judgment, said Helga Hufflepuff. Her easygoing attitude was nowhere to be seen as a mask of stoicism surrounded her. I concur. If we're free to focus on the dragons, our chances of victory increase twofold. Rowena quietly said, her green eyes staring piercingly into Harry's for a moment before being trained on Slytherin, who remained silent till now. Suddenly, Harry was facing the full attention of Salazar Slytherin. "Will you guard Hogwarts, Hadrian Targaryen?" Slytherin asked, switching to Parseltongue. "No harm shall befall Hogwarts or her inhabitants under my watch." "I swear it." Harry hissed back in the noble tongue of serpents. "Then the wards are yours to command Hadrian Targaryen," said Slytherin, raising his staff, which glowed an eerie white glow at the snake head on its top. Harry raised his wand, pressing the tip of his wand against the snakehead when Slytherin extended his staff in his direction. The white glow slipped into the tip of his wand, and Harry could feel the wards encompassing the castle. "All right, then. Let's give Sabretooth a warm welcome," said Godric, fishing a pointy hat out of nowhere and covering his head with it. Chapter 88, The Siege of Hogwarts Part 1. It was the first time Harry was in control of the wards of a magical place, much less a gigantic castle like Hogwarts. He had experience in erecting wards over Grimmauld Place with Sirius. That was the extent of his expertise in maintaining wards. But those wards were later upgraded by Sirius, employing some professionals in tethering the wards to a proper wardstone. However, Harry didn't have the opportunity to study the intricacies behind such a method properly. He was keyed into the wards of Grimmauld Place, and to him, that was more than enough. He also didn't have much time to study the wardstone and how the wards were tethered or controlled because he was otherwise engaged. His focus tended to focus overtly on battle magic in the past, and right now, Harry was feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The only reason he was not panicking was because he knew he had to stay strong and keep Hogwarts safe while the Founders handled the dragons. Failure was not an option when he was in charge of the fate of 30 wizarding families. Only 10 wizards were capable of defending themselves out of those 30 families, which was a poor number. He had counted 97 wizards and witches, including children, among the refugees. Out of such a staggering number of people, only 10 were moderately powerful enough to defend themselves. It's no wonder why Muggles dominated the world. Harry thought. Most wizards and witches have not even mastered fire. "They're guarding the entrances as you ordered, Lord Targaryen." Harry eyed the man who updated him on the status of the wizards and witches assigned to guard the entrances and passageways inside the castle. "Good. You can stay by my side, or you can stay with the families." "It's your choice," said Harry. "I'll stand by your side, my lord," Keith Doyle said. Harry nodded before his attention shifted to the battlefield. The 4 Founders stood inside the protective barriers surrounding Hogwarts, facing the Goblin army. "They'll triumph over the dragons, right?" Keith asked earnestly. "You've known them far longer than I do. What do you think?" Harry turned the question around to the troubled-looking wizard. "I've known Lord Salazar all my life. The Slytherins have guarded this land for generations. The other 3 came from afar with Lord Salazar after one of his many travels. Together, they're the most powerful sorcerers this land has ever seen." "But..." Keith trailed off. "But what?" Harry asked curiously. "The goblins, they're powerful and cruel. They're strong warriors with strange magic, and they burnt down our houses and villages. Even if we survive this war and return, we'll be blamed by the Muggles and hunted down as word spreads about us to other villages. Either we all die at the hands of the goblins, or we get hunted by the Muggles," Keith said, his eyes downcast. "Then band together and make yourself a new home close to Hogwarts. Your children can benefit from Hogwarts, and your families can build a safe haven for future generations of wizards and witches." "It's not so easy, Lord Targaryen. How will we benefit from trade if we are not among the Muggles? Who'll give us access to gold and silver? Who'll trust us when we sell our wares? Nothing worth doing in life is ever easy. There will always be obstacles, no matter what you do. The strength of a people, a civilization is not defined by how easily they succeeded but based on how much they endured together," said Harry, disliking the attitude of wizards who always give up and hide away rather than face the world with their heads held high. "It's easy for you to say these things, my lord. Our families are not as strong as you or them, said Keith, nodding at the founders. Harry turned his back to the battlefield as he stared at Keith. The wizard looked young, but the disheveled black hair, unkempt black beard and the dark beneath his eyes made the man look far older. Do you think it's magic that makes those four stand straight with their shoulders back as they stare down at the dragons and an entire army of bloodthirsty goblins? No, it's not. They know they can die any moment, but they stand because they have the resolve to assume the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, said Harry, looking at the founders. Once you assume responsibility, it weighs you down but also tethers you firmly to the ground. That's why this huge army cannot make them move an inch backwards. They've planted their feet firmly on the ground and are ready to take on all the challenges the world throws at them. The question is, are you ready to do the same? War horns blew across from the battlefield, making Harry take a deep breath. It begins. He muttered, staring at the flurry of activity behind the goblin army lines. The goblin warriors unleashed a first salvo of attacks using their siege engines against the protective barriers surrounding Hogwarts. Harry felt every single bombardment in his bones as his magic made him aware of every single attack and its intensity. It was a feeling Harry was unfamiliar with so far, and it was slightly disconcerting to focus his attention on a singular matter or area in the battlefield as the goblins attacked many places simultaneously. Taking a deep breath, Harry closed his eyes and centered himself in his mind. Withdrawing his awareness gently, Harry managed to occlude his mind. The magic in his body, which had been acting restless till then because of the constant barrage of attacks, settled like a placid lake. When he opened his eyes, Harry felt slightly better with his magic settling down and not acting like he was about to get pulverized by the siege. With his mind firmly tucked behind a barrier, he could feel the wards with greater precision. The attacks on the barriers were like pinpricks, and he found he could reinforce the barrier with his own magic. This is exhilarating, Harry muttered, feeling like he was in multiple places simultaneously because of the wards. He distinctly remembered that the wards surrounding Grimmauld Place had a vaguer stratum when it came to pinpointing the location of a breach. Those wards only gave a general idea of the direction of the breach and didn't distinguish whether it was a large or small breach. But the wards currently surrounding Hogwarts were far more sophisticated than what Harry was used to. It even challenged the notion that magic became far more versatile and sophisticated as time rolled by. Or Hogwarts still had wards like these but remained inactive because it had stopped facing sieges for centuries. Harry mused. Either way, Harry made a mental note to study the wards protecting Hogwarts. He had no doubt it'd come in handy in the future. I've always wondered why they keep attacking the topside of the barriers instead of the ground, Keith commented from his side. It's because all barriers are strong near the ground. The weakness of the magical barrier lies at the farthest point from the ground, Harry answered. But why? Because the magic of a wizard alone does not fuel barriers. It absorbs magic from the earth to sustain itself. As you can guess, the farther it is from the ground, the weaker a barrier gets, Harry explained, watching more and more large rune-enforced boulders grind against the magical barriers protecting Hogwarts. However, Harry noticed when the goblins switched from bombarding the barrier with stones to long metal bolts. This time, the push against the barriers was far more powerful than the boulders. Shield breakers, Harry thought with a frown. The bolts impinging on the wards were somehow consecrated with magic meant for breaking shields. They might be enchanted bolts, Harry thought. After a couple of hits on the barrier, Harry felt holes opening up over some parts of the spherical barrier. He immediately poured more energy into the barrier to close up the holes, but more and more boulders and bolts started hitting the barrier. There was a concentrated barrage of attacks against the barrier, keeping Harry on edge as he strained to keep the protective barrier intact. Suddenly, Harry felt a large breach open on the barrier. He saw a half-burned boulder breach through the barrier coming towards the castle. Before he could strike down the boulder, a bright flash of yellow energy struck it, shattering it into smithereens. Harry was not surprised to see Salazar Slytherin with his serpent-headed staff raised high in the air. Good to know a blasting curse would destroy these boulders despite their runes, Harry thought. Look! They are releasing the dragons, Keith pointed out in alarm. Sure enough, Harry saw the goblins unchaining the dragons one by one. He was a little relieved to see no Hungarian horntail among the 4 dragons. All 4 dragons looked native to the British Isles with their long, curvy horns on their heads and wide, expansive wings. Their tails were not thorny and looked rather plain. 2 dragons had jet black scales, while the other 2 had red and green scales adorning their bodies. For a moment, Harry thought the dragons would attack the goblins as their bindings were released, but the beasts took to the skies carrying 3 goblin warriors on their necks, respectively. How the fuck did these goblins tame these dragons? Harry wondered. Wow! The sound coming from the back attracted Harry's attention as it was not Keith Doyle who spoke up. His instincts were not wrong as Harry's eyes met the wide brown eyes of a familiar boy he met earlier. It was none other than his new student, Carlin Flanagan. Boy! What are you doing here? Keith thundered. Why aren't you with the families? Harry couldn't be bothered to focus on the 2 wizards because the 4 dragons opened their maws and breathed bright, hot fire into the barrier. The outpouring of magic in the flames was tremendous, and Harry was forced to pull more magic into the barrier to maintain it. Harry braced himself for the next attack, and he knew what was to be expected. Confirming his worries, the dragons smashed into the weakened barrier with their heavily scaled bodies. The strain this time was far too great, and Harry couldn't replenish the barrier in a timely manner. The dragons clawed their way in, shearing off chunks from the barrier with their claws while thick scales protected their bodies. 4 blasts of energy struck the green dragon on its belly, blowing it away in one swoop. The dragon roared as it was blasted away from the barrier by the force of the spells. Even when Harry was far removed from the founders, he could feel the preeminence of their magic. Especially when the 4 of them were together, it was like watching raw magic coming to the surface, shining like a bright star. The green dragon tumbled down from the sky, falling face first on the barrier, crushing the goblin warriors on its neck against the surface of the barrier. The armor the goblin warriors wore didn't help them the least as they were cooked alive by the barrier and crushed to a pulp by the dragon's weight. The other 3 dragons managed to claw their way inside the barrier while the founders were distracted, but not without suffering some damage. Harry had tried to rejuvenate the barriers as best as possible despite the dragons smashing several large holes. Their scales were sizzling with heat after they forced their way in. The mighty dragons let out terrifying roars that shook the castle to its core before they took flight in different directions. 2 dragons went straight for the founders, while the 3rd dragon went straight for the castle. That's not good, Harry thought, seeing the dragons split off. Just as he feared, the 2 black-scaled dragons were enough of a distraction to keep the 4 founders engaged. This left the red dragon free to do what it wanted, which meant Harry would have to fight it to keep Hogwarts safe. Oh, no. Not again. Harry muttered dejectedly, realizing he was about to face a dragon in a straight battle. Unlike last time, the battle would not end if he stole an egg. Strangely enough, he found himself missing the first task of the Triwizard Tournament. He cast a hopeful look at the founders and found them wholly engaged in a fight with the 2 dragons. Helga Hufflepuff had a dragon ensnared in vines and thick wooden roots while Rowena bombarded the trapped dragon with spell after spell. Godric and Salazar, on the other hand, were forming rock golems to attack and defend against the dragon they were facing. No help from them. Harry mused, keeping a wary eye on the red dragon as it drew closer towards the castle. At this point, Harry had 2 choices. He could either focus on strengthening the barrier, which had weakened under the dragon's assault, or he could focus on the dragon that would undoubtedly burn Hogwarts to the ground. Either way, Harry saw no way to avoid a lot of damage on Hogwarts, but the dragon was far more threatening than the bombardment from the goblin army in his eyes. Keith. Harry suddenly called the wizard standing by his side. My lord? Can you use the blasting curse? Harry asked. Yes, lord. Good. Hogwarts will be facing bombardment from the goblins. Try to destroy as many attacks as you can with the blasting curse from this tower, Harry ordered before jumping on the parapet of the tower. Also, keep the boy close, Harry added as his eyes fell on Carlin. It'll be dangerous for him to go back now. I'll shield the tower from any attacks. Harry placed a runestone on the tower and charged it with his magic. A shield made of blue energy encompassed the tower partially. The runestone was a work in progress, and it showed by the incomplete shield surrounding the tower. But for the time being, it was an adequate shield for the situation they were facing. He had been hoping to complete it and use it to protect Potter Manor from Voldemort's attack in the future. With that done, Harry jumped out of the tower, assuming his spirit form. His body transformed into sparkling silver smoke as he streaked across the early morning sky straight for the red dragon. That should look so cool, Harry thought giddily. Harry couldn't help but feel the rush of battle despite the massive dragon heading his way. More than fear, he was excited at the prospect of an air battle against a dragon. The worries he had been having while standing inside the tower fled as Harry streaked across the sky at full speed. The red dragon had undoubtedly picked out Harry's arrival and considered him a threat because once Harry climbed straight up to the clouds, the dragon followed him instead of attacking Hogwarts. Okay. You got the dragon's attention, Potter, Harry muttered. Several whistling sounds reached his ears, and Harry was forced to do several acrobatic twists and turns while flying to evade a rain of arrows. Looking back, Harry saw the goblins strapped to the harness on the dragon's back were the culprits. Okay. New plan. Kill the little buggers on the dragon's back before dealing with the dragon, Harry decided. With that thought in mind, Harry twisted and turned in midair, forcing the dragon through hard turns while evading the arrows from the goblins until suddenly, he disappeared into a cloud. When the dragon came soaring in, Harry expertly hid himself on the underside of the dragon's belly. The dragon flew aimlessly, searching for Harry until it slowed down a little after finding nothing but white clouds and a blue sky around it. After ensuring the dragon was sufficiently distracted, Harry emerged from beneath it in haste from its tail end. The goblins were wide open before Harry's eyes, and he didn't waste the opportunity to kill all three. Torrens Incendio. A blast of red-hot fire shot out of the tip of his wand, consuming the three goblins. The flames cooked the goblins in their armor while also burning away the bindings of the harness they were using. The goblins, consumed by his spell, fell from the dragon's back with the harness slipping away. Their tale of suffering ended abruptly when the red dragon promptly snapped its jaws around the burning goblins in midair. The sickening crunch as the dragon munched on the bones of the goblins made Harry flinch. It was all the more intimidating because the dragon stared at Harry with its large yellow eyes while enjoying the fried goblins for breakfast. Gales of wind brushed past Harry as the dragon remained suspended in the air, its wings flapping in the sky to stay afloat. Even though he was a bit intimidated by the dragon, Harry felt like trying his luck in suspending hostilities with the red dragon. I mean, you no harm, great dragon. I'll help you to get free from the goblins, Harry hissed in Parseltongue. The dragon paused its chewing and roared at him. Oh yeah. I should have tried French, Harry thought sardonically. Harry turned midair and flew away with the red dragon hot on his tail. He twisted and turned, tried going high and low, tried all sorts of maneuvers, but the dragon was unwilling to leave him be. Oh, come on, you blasted dragon. Why don't you just fly away? Harry screamed. The dragon answered with a roar, and it tried to roast him alive with dragon fire. But Harry evaded it by plunging into a steep dive. Startling Harry, his ears picked up on the painful whimper of the dragon, making him look up. He saw the dragon going into a free fall with a shower of stone along with its massive body. One of those stone boulders must have hit the dragon, Harry thought. Harry also noticed that one of the dragon's wings was twisted at an odd angle. The dragon desperately tried to beat its other wing as it spiraled towards the ground. The dragon made pitiful sounds all the way, and Harry, who heard these sounds, found it to be a desperate cry for help from a creature that was staring death at its face. Oh, what the hell? Harry muttered, chasing after the dragon on instinct. The logical side of his mind kept saying that he should leave the dragon to fall to its death or even get gravely injured. After all, the fall would keep the dragon out of the war and make it easy to kill. On the other hand, another voice in his head was urging him to save the dragon. For reasons beyond his understanding, Harry found himself heeding the latter voice. Streaking past the dragon in his spirit form, Harry fired off several cushioning charms on the ground before conjuring a giant rubber bed. The dragon smashed into the rubber bed with full force but suffered no further injuries. Harry kept a wary eye on the dragon as it slowly moved out of the rubber bed he conjured and into the ground. It let out pitiful sounds while licking its injured wing. Harry even saw tears leaking from the dragon's eyes, making him feel sorry for the magnificent creature. "I offered you peace. We could have parted on good terms," Harry said to the dragon, only to receive more pitiful groans and screeching from the dragon while he materialized in his physical form on the ground. The dragon made a fearful noise in the back of its throat as it backpedaled on the ground, seeing several streaks of burning boulders coming its way. Tenitrum fulminata. The white lightning that blasted out of the tip of his wand split off and struck down all the boulders within the blink of an eye. The boulders exploded into a shower of pebbles. "All right. As for you," Harry said, pointing his wand at the dragon, making it backpedal more. "You'll behave and harm no one." The dragon folded in on itself and stayed unmoving on the ground while observing him. Noticing that the dragon was not acting hostile, Harry focused on the barrier surrounding Hogwarts. Raising his wand, Harry shot raw magic into the barrier. Steadily but surely, the barrier started to recover, blocking out the siege weapons of the goblins once again. The holes that were clawed open by the dragons sealed themselves shut. "Okay. That's dealt with." Harry let out a relieved sigh once the barrier was back in place. Other than some minor damage, Hogwarts was mostly standing intact, and he could see the tower he had left Carlin and Keith was standing strong without suffering any damage to its structure. Now, let's see how the Founders are faring. Chapter 89, The Siege of Hogwarts Part 2. Harry found the Founders in battle with the two dragons. He wouldn't exactly call it a battle because it was so one-sided. The dragons were getting thrashed by the Founders. Lady Hufflepuff had one dragon ensnared in gigantic roots and vines while Rowena bombarded it with blasting curses. The dragon struggled to move or even let out a sound as its mouth was tightly wound up by whatever spell Lady Hufflepuff used. The dragon looked like it was on its last legs, fighting to keep its awareness despite the spells impacting its body. He decided to pitch in and help the two witches deal with the dragon. He touched down on the ground with his body covered in sparkling silver mist that vanished as his body assumed physical form once more. His sudden appearance on the battlefield startled the two witches. "You can fly?" Rowena asked in amazement and a hint of jealousy. Harry was momentarily confused as to why Rowena Ravenclaw was jealous. After all, he had acquired the skill thanks to Helena Ravenclaw sharing her mother's knowledge with him in the future. Therefore, it stands to reason Rowena and Salazar were aware of the ritual to acquire the ability of flight in a spirit form. Unless, of course, Rowena has yet to stumble onto the ritual. Harry thought. There was also the distinct possibility that Rowena had the knowledge of the ritual but had not perfected it yet. On a good day, I can go faster than a dragon. Thankfully, this was one of those days. Harry replied in a lackluster manner. The dragon strained against the bindings, snapping one or two wooden shackles, attracting their attention. Harry could see the crushed forms of goblins on the dragon's back, bathing the dark scales of the dragon in goblin blood. "This one is a stubborn one, huh?" Harry stared at the defiant look in the dragon's eyes as it renewed its efforts to break free from the bindings. Rowena and Helga resumed bombarding the dragons with spells, but the dragon refused to go down. Harry was a tad surprised to see the dragon resisting the attacks from the two witches. They were not throwing around simple magic against the dragon. An ordinary dragon should have fallen unconscious by now. Feeling a little curious, Harry pointed his wand at the dragon's head. Stupefy. Harry cast the stunning spell consecutively against the dragon's head. After the 8th time, Harry stopped bombarding the dragon with the spell, seeing as it only annoyed the dragon. He wished he had the foresight to learn the sleeping charm Fleur used on the dragon when she faced the first task. He felt the charm would have been extremely useful in handling the dragon. A giant fist made of rock smashed on the dragon's head with ample force. The dragon that had refused to go down stubbornly till then slept soundly on the ground. "That's how you deal with a drake like this one," Godric bellowed, letting out a hearty laugh standing atop his rock golem. Harry saw the other dragon had stopped thrashing around with a stone arm choking it until it fell unconscious. Its limbs were locked in with earthly hands clamping the dragon down by its wings and tail to the ground. "So what are we to do with these dragons?" Harry asked. "We'll have to kill them and extract useful parts, but first, we have to destroy that army," said Salazar, glaring at the goblin army that had renewed their assault on the barrier protecting Hogwarts. "I agree." Rowena pitched in, shooting a cold look at the goblins. "Sabretooth will never let us conduct our affairs in peace. The goblins must learn a lesson in blood that they'll never forget for a few generations." Harry's eyes shifted to the front lines once again when he felt the barrier flicker far more than usual. To his utter surprise, the first dragon knocked out by the founders at the beginning of the fight was now making itself known by clawing at the barrier. "Oh, I've had enough of these annoying beasts." Harry groaned in frustration. "We'll need a plan of attack," said Slytherin. "I have a plan." "Attack," said Harry. Assuming his spirit form, Harry started to lift off from the ground. "I like this plan," Godric said with a massive, bloodthirsty grin. Harry flew straight for the edge of the barrier, where the dragon was trying its best to claw a hole through. He went past the barrier and avoided battling the dragon. Instead, he flew straight for the goblin army. "You little buggers were tolerable as bankers. Because of you, I've been unable to even take a good look at the time turner that brought me into this blasted place. Now disappear into ashes." Concentrating the rage and all the worries, he poured every ounce of those feelings into his magic. The tip of his wand pointed towards the goblin army below. With a mighty yell, he unleashed a devastating spell that was fueled by rage and hunger for death. Fiend Fire. Bright red flames roared out of the tip of his wand. Harry tied his bet to control the flames, to shape it in such a way that it assumed the form of a snake. A head of the snake formed, followed by a long tail connected to the tip of his wand. Harry was pleasantly surprised to see the Fiend Fire curse bend easily to his will. But that surprise was momentary as he ignored it in favor of unleashing the spell on the army. The Hellfire curse bent perfectly to his will and created wide rings of fire as it crashed into the ground. The snake made out of hellfire reared its head as the rest of its body burned away the tents and goblin warriors into ashes. Feeling complete control over the spell, Harry directed the snake to attack the siege engines. The wooden constructs had no chance as they were quickly devoured by the cursed flames, as were the goblin warriors nearby. Harry was forced to cut off the spell when some of the goblin warriors tried to shoot him down with their arrows. But he was not worried as the Fiend Fire curse was notorious for sustaining itself by devouring everything around them. The screams of the goblins reached his ears as the Fiend Fire curse became far more brutal without his control. The fiery snake made of the cursed fire sought out the goblins one by one and devoured them en masse. It went on to attack the tents and the supply carts of the army and started to devour everything in its vicinity to sustain itself. This was the true danger of the Fiend Fire spell. It was a spell that refused to subjugate itself to a wizard's will. It devoured everything to fuel itself and, in the process, destroyed everything. Harry allowed the spell to wreak havoc for a few more minutes before he settled down near the edge of the wards beside Godric. "That's a dangerous spell," Godric commented. The illustrious founder of Hogwarts didn't look the least bit bothered, nor was he unhappy with the spell Harry used. Harry was relieved that Godric was not antagonistic towards him for using a dark curse like Fiendfire against the goblins. "Yes, it is. It's far more dangerous when it's set loose without a wizard to control its hunger," said Harry. Pointing his wand at the wildly cackling fire, he drew a circle in the air, opening a tear in space. A dark hole opened up in the middle of the camp and began to suck in the flames and everything that was burning. It took a few minutes, but all the flames were sealed away in the tear in space, and Harry allowed the spell to collapse in on itself. He noticed the green dragon was bound by giant earthen hands, pushing its head and limbs to the ground. The dragon was grunting and struggling against the bindings on its body, but it was having no success in escaping its fate. "Your proficiency in fire magic is commendable. I don't believe I've ever encountered such a powerful flame in my journey," Godric commented, bending down and inspecting the charred ground with his palm hovering above the sand. Harry was somewhat confused by Godric's words as he had seen references made in several scrolls inside Slytherin's chamber about the Fiendfire curse. Maybe the founders learned about the spell later, or Slytherin never shared the spell with his colleagues. Harry mused. There was also the distinct possibility that one of Slytherin's descendants brought the knowledge of the spell to the chamber. There was no reason to believe Tom Riddle was the sole person to find the secret chamber left by Salazar Slytherin. Your magic is also unique. I've not seen anyone bend the earth like you and with such ease. Harry paid compliments to Godric where it was due. Despicable scum. The lot of ya, a goblin shouted, riding into the field atop a massive boar with a huge hammer in hand. Sabretooth. We meet again. I see your people have placed a crown on atop your head. Were your people that desperate and lacking anyone of sound mind? Godric shouted back a tad gleefully. Nice trash talk. Harry thought, eyeing Godric Gryffindor and the Goblin King. Harry had read in passing about Godric Gryffindor's many battles against the goblins. Of course, any information in the history books was vague and limiting. The only relevant part was that Godric Gryffindor was gifted a goblin steel sword for his ferocious battle prowess by some nameless goblin after an unknown battle. You! I curse you, wizard. You and your kind are a blight on this world. I'll end you by my own hands. Sabretooth declared, brandishing his hammer threateningly. What a douche. Harry thought, readying for anything from the Goblin King. Attack! Sabretooth yelled, charging forward on his giant boar. The surviving goblins heeded the call and rushed towards Harry and Godric, brandishing their weapons and war cries on their lips. You've done enough, Hadrian. Leave them to me. Godric whispered when Harry started raising his wand. Godric walked forward and raised his staff in the air. Harry's eyes widened as he sensed the buildup of a tremendous amount of magical energy. He found himself looking at the ground where he could feel the magic rushing towards Godric. Then Godric slammed the staff on the ground, and Harry's senses went haywire momentarily. It was as if there was a clap of thunder, and in the next moment, the earth shifted under the feet of the goblin army. Earthen spikes skewered the incoming goblins to death, and the rest were thrown away by the overturning of the ground they were standing on. Harry's eyes widened when he noticed trees had fallen over as far as his eyes could see under Godric's spell. That's an impressive spell, Harry muttered. Not as impressive as flying, though. You should prepare for a persistent onslaught of questions from Rowena. She'll not leave you alone until she pries that spell out of you. Godric laughed. Harry stared at Godric Gryffindor, weirded out by the man's attitude. One moment, the wizard was crushing the entire earth for miles on end, and in the next, he was laughing like someone told him a great joke. Harry was wondering what sort of emotional roller coaster Godric Gryffindor was going through in his mind. He had no doubt Godric Gryffindor was using what the modern-day wizards would call old magic. He sensed the magic surge from the earth and bent to Godric's will in a jiffy. It was the art of manipulating the magic of the world without using the bodily magic of a wizard. It was pretty fascinating to watch a man like Godric Gryffindor performing magic long lost to the wizarding world. Is it because of the staff that he is using old magic so easily? Harry wondered in the confines of his mind. Wizards had gradually stopped using staves in favor of wands as spells became more sophisticated and connected to runes and arithmancy. The magic prevalent in the world was gathered up by wizards in their bodies naturally, like all magical beings. But wizards of the future had stopped directly wielding the magic of the world and instead termed it as old magic, confining it to the magic of a bygone era. Instead, wizards and witches depended on their wands to pull out the magic in their bodies to shape their spells. A staff is in constant contact with the earth. Does that make it easy for a wizard to wield old magic easily? Harry wondered. If that was the case, Harry saw the advantages in learning to use a staff in tandem with a wand. But he could also see why the Ministry would never approve. Using old magic would leave all their monitoring spells impotent. The unique energy signatures of wizards and witches would be scrubbed altogether if they started using old magic en masse. Maybe the wizard's staff went out of fashion after the creation of the Ministry. Harry mused. He wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. Tracking wands and controlling the supply of wands should have been one of the first things the ministry did after its creation. Managing the supply and monitoring the production of weapons were always some of the first things any government did once it came into power. Harry accompanied Godric when the older wizard carefully navigated through the desolate battlefield until they reached the prone form of the Goblin King lying on the ground, choking on his own blood. Several earthen spears had skewered through the Goblin King's legs and shoulders. The chest plate of Sabretooth was crushed under the attack of earthen spears made by Godric, but the armor held firm on the goblin's body. "I'll kill ya for this," the Goblin King spat out blood at Godric's feet. "No, you won't," Godric said firmly. Godric unsheathed his sword and plunged it straight through the throat of Sabretooth. The Goblin King grunted as blood flowed out, and slowly, his eyes lost their light. "If any of you foul creatures have survived this battle, I suggest you run back to your homes. If you dally any longer in these lands, I'll have your heads mounted on the castle walls. You have till sunset to make yourself scarce." Godric yelled into the deathly silent battlefield, which had turned into the graveyard of the goblin army. Harry was relieved that no one among the survivors was courageous enough to challenge Godric. Finally, this blasted war is over. Harry let out a relieved sigh. "We should kill the dragons. They'll be quite useful for their parts," Salazar commented, glaring at the 4 captured dragons. The red dragon Harry had captured let out a fearful whine as it tried to hide its enormous body behind Harry quite unsuccessfully. For some odd reason, the red dragon took a shine to Harry and thought it could get away scot-free if it acted like an innocent puppy. While Harry was becoming increasingly sympathetic to the dragon's attempts to escape what was most assuredly a painful death, the rest of the founders were lacking any sort of sympathy for the creatures. While the red dragon was somewhat behaving tame for its kind, the other 3 dragons were not so diplomatic. The black-scaled dragons were the worst, as they constantly tried to burn everyone while the green dragon attempted to break the bindings. Their reaction was understandable. If Harry were in their position, he'd also be trying to break free. "I concur. I could see many uses for some dragon blood," Helga Hufflepuff added, eyeing the dragons like they were a prize. "Spare them," said Harry, earning curious looks from the 4 founders. "They've been held captive for so long. Give them freedom. They'll only bring ruin everywhere. They could even attack us once we release them in the wild," said Rowena. "Or they might fly far away from the land they've been held captive for so long. They've probably served the goblins from the moment they hatched from the eggs. Give them the chance to live a free life," Harry argued. "Why are you so adamant in defending the dragons?" Godric asked. Harry turned his head to stare at the red dragon, looking at them all fearfully. Sometimes, he felt like the dragon understood what they were saying. Oh, what the hell? Might as well make up some more lies to save 4 lives. Harry thought. "My family carries dragons on our banners, a 3-headed red dragon. Valyrian noble houses are called dragonlords because we learned to coexist with dragons on our island. Valyria is a sanctuary for all magical creatures, and these dragons deserve another chance. Let them be free to make their own choices rather than sentence them to death for their actions while serving under the thrall of goblins." The founders stared at him silently for a long moment, making Harry slightly nervous. Thankfully, the scrutiny came to an end when Godric let out a loud sigh and spoke in favor of Harry's decision. It didn't take long for Helga and Rowena to side with his opinion reluctantly. "Fine," Salazar grunted. "The dragons can go free, but they're your responsibility, Hadrian Targaryen. If they harm Hogwarts, you'll kill them. Do you agree?" Harry had no other way but to assume responsibility for the dragons. "I hope you're happy," Harry muttered to the red dragon once the founders left him with the dragons. "I hope you can communicate with your dragon friends to fly as far away from here as possible and never return." The red dragon let out a snort through its nostrils. Harry didn't know whether the dragon was mocking him or saying yes. He liked to think the dragon was replying to him positively because he was not looking forward to killing 4 dragons if they misbehaved. The dragons had to stay the whole day on the castle grounds, and he had tried to help them the best way he could. At his request, Helga had attempted to heal the dragons as best as she could. Unfortunately, most of her enchantments did not work on the red dragon whose wing was bent at an off angle. The thick hides of the dragons not only resisted hostile spells but also healing spells. The other dragons were less injured comparatively, and they were quickly patched up and ready to go. So, hoping nothing untoward happened, Harry released the dragons after urging them using Parseltongue to fly away. The dragons had looked at him with thinly veiled contempt whenever he used Parseltongue. But he knew no other language that could communicate with the dragons. Thankfully, the dragons must have understood that they were being set free because when he vanished the bindings on their body, they didn't linger for a moment and flew westward. Phew! Harry released a breath he was holding, feeling somewhat relieved the dragons didn't make an issue. He could see some of the families taking refuge in Hogwarts come out to see the sight of the dragons taking flight. While there was the danger of the dragons turning hostile, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see so many dragons assembled in one place. Even now, he could feel awe when he looked upon such majestic creatures like dragons. Turning his sights on the red dragon, he was left with a quandary. The dragon had to be sheltered until it could be healed. That meant it had to be fed as it was unable to hunt. Well, I guess I'll have to feed you somehow. What is your preference? Harry asked the dragon, which tilted his head in return. Right. Silly of me. Do you prefer a goat or a cow? The dragon snorted and lay down on the ground, watching him like a hawk. Chapter 90, A Dilemma. Finally. Harry let out a breath he was holding as he finished writing the schematics of the ward scheme and some assortment of enchantments that he thought would be useful for Hogwarts. He took a last cursory look at the scroll's contents before rolling it up. Harry patted himself on the back for having the foresight to take up ancient runes and arithmancy in his 4th year. Without those two subjects, he'd have sounded like an idiot while describing the spells in the scroll. Most Latin-based spells were derived from their Anglo-Saxon runic counterparts and streamlined by arithmancy. Even the most basic spells that were in use before the advent of wands were converted to fit the modern script. This also meant the spells in Harry's repository of knowledge were only as useful if wizards and witches were using their wands and not their staves. This was why he was not surprised when he was asked to incorporate the wards and charms into the ward scheme of Hogwarts. The founders understood that their way of magic was not suited to the wards he proposed, not without some heavy modifications. But Rowena was not someone so easily let down by the differences in their approach to magic. He didn't know how, but the woman had found a wand on short notice and started practicing with it. Or maybe she had the wand long before he met her. According to the history lessons he received in Hogwarts, the invention of wands preceded Hogwarts, but it took time to get popular with wizards and witches. Harry supposed the advent of the modern English script hastened the popularity of wands. Since the modern script of English was derived from German and Latin, it was not a long shot to assume the Gaelic-based spells became unpopular among wizards and witches, which led to the decline of staves. Of course, there could be other reasons, and Harry was merely basing his observations on pure conjecture at this point. Setting aside the quill, Harry stretched his limbs. He was feeling the telltale signs of boredom as he had been cooped up in a chamber Salazar Slytherin had graciously offered him in Hogwarts. In return, Harry had started giving lectures to the handful of students that Hogwarts was currently housing. Some were newly made orphans, and Harry felt obligated to help them get back on their feet. Seeing that they needed financial security, he had them training in magical sensing and some gouging spells that could work in their favor. Gold and other precious metals were the currency of the time. Harry felt like wizards could utilize their magic to unearth precious metals and make a decent living. While the four founders covered other bases of their knowledge, Harry tried to impart the knowledge they needed the most to thrive in the world. But that was not the extent of his involvement. He had been lobbying the families to build a new village near Hogwarts. He even offered them aid in the construction and warding of the village to give them a safe place to live without being bothered by any foe. But the people were still hesitant to form a tight-knit magical community for idiotic reasons. At this point, Harry was starting to think most wizards and witches were closet masochists and had zero survival instincts. All of them were worried about how they'd get cut off from trade with muggles when they should be worrying about their lives. But, at the same time, he could see the disadvantages of cowering behind wards for perpetuity. While wizards needed tight-knit communities under protective wards, they also needed to get exposed to the world. Harry was broken out of his musings when he heard a knock on his door. With a flick of his wand, the door swung open, and it was none other than his apprentice. "Carlin. You should be with Lady Hufflepuff," Harry said, staring at the boy confusedly. "Lady Hufflepuff cancelled the classes. The families are moving out today." "What?" Harry sat up straight in his chair. "Where are they going?" "No one knows. I suppose most of them want to return to their old homes and rebuild," Carlin said with a shrug. Harry almost facepalmed and wanted to use a few choice words on the stubborn wizards and witches. "What do you want to do, Carlin?" Harry asked patiently, suppressing his annoyance. "I want to stay close to Hogwarts and you, my lord." "What about your mother?" Harry asked. "She wants to stay. She thinks staying close to Hogwarts is safe." "Good. Your mother is wise, unlike those idiots with a death wish," Harry muttered, shaking his head disappointedly. "My mother says they'll listen if you talk to them again. If you promise protection, they'll follow you," said Carlin in a manner that was supposed to look innocent, but he knew his apprentice was a crafty fellow. The little bugger was goading him to assume responsibility for the 30 or so families and build a village for them. Voldemort's philosophy of magic as might had some elements of truth in it, especially during this era. Power was a currency highly sought after at this time. Perhaps across time. Harry mused. "My mother asked me to give you this," said Carlin before placing a black cloth on the table. "It's a gift for saving our lives, my lord." The innocent look on the brown-haired boy's face let Harry know that it was another trick of some sort. When he unruffled the cloth, he was met with the three-headed dragon banner of House Targaryen. "Crafty little fellow. Trying to appeal to my noble lineage and guilt-trip me or entice me with the opportunity to lead a village. Not bad," Harry thought. Of course, he had suspected something of this sort when they had insisted on seeing his family's sigil. Their reasoning was to honor the noble lineage that saved their lives. "I believe I'll have a talk with them one last time. Let's see whether I can't persuade them," Harry said eventually, which lit up his apprentice's face with a radiant smile. It was not like he was making much progress with deciphering the time turner anyway. There were so many unidentified spells bound to the time turner in his hand, and he could not discern most of them. The library in Hogwarts had so far proven to be a giant disappointment. There was not a grain of information about magic related to the aspect of time. He was still searching and combing through the many available scrolls in his free time, but he was starting to get the feeling that he was wasting his time. The only good news so far was he managed to keep the time turner intact. He had even secured the delicate piece of cosmic time bomb in a charmed box under heavy wards. With nothing much going for him, Harry thought it'd be worth his time to help the refugees in Hogwarts settle. Besides, there was a certain thrill in participating in the construction of what had eventually become Hogsmeade Village. If he didn't know warming charms, he was sure he'd have been suffering from hypothermia or worse, as the climate had taken a turn for the worse overnight. Still, Harry made sure to buy some fur from the local hunters. However, it became a problem when the families did not have enough fur to keep them warm on the snowy nights in Scotland. It became all the more important to gather as much fur as possible because the refugees had no homes to resettle after the war. That was how Harry found himself facing the first challenge to make Hogsmeade possible. Fortunately, hunting for fur was an easy enough activity for a wizard with a certain skill set. All he had to do was track the wildlife using tracking charms and have them killed before they could blink. After some judicial use of cutting charms, Harry scored the highest number of kills among the hunting party. The number of bears, badgers and red deer that fell prey to his spells was enough to keep a good number of people warm in the worsening cold that was setting in. When Harry returned with the hunting party from the nearby forest, he found the people were fast working on raising temporary tents a bit farther from the Black Lake. But they needed more forest area to construct houses for the families. Cut down the trees and make a long clearing. "I'll have the trees marked," Harry ordered the wizards and witches around him. It took him the better part of the day to cut down the trees and make a clearing near the Black Lake. Fires were up and running by the time the evening sun was shining in the sky. The tents the people erected were charmed with warming charms to ward off the cold during the night. By the time the sun started to disappear from the sky, Harry had nearly finished placing all the relevant wards he knew that could safeguard the budding wizarding community from harm. He even made it into a practical session of his class for his students while he helped their families set up their new homes. You must visualize the result of the spell that you're using. The imagery helps in the concentration and execution of the spell. Harry advised some of his struggling students to perform the spell. Harry walked among his students, observing their work and, if need be, helping them with the spell. When the light started to dim, he escorted the children back to the castle while he stayed behind to light the fires to keep the families warm. While the tents were warm thanks to the vigorous use of the warming charm, the lands around them were another issue. People had to cook their food and could not do it inside their measly tent. It'd have been possible if space expansion charms were used. Unfortunately, that spell was something Harry never bothered to learn. His one-track mind of focusing on offense and defense was biting him on his back. Harry looked up when he picked up on the sound of flapping wings. A strong gale of wind rushed past him, making him shield his eyes as the snow acted like arrows on his body. He observed the red dragon circling back in the sky, intent on landing near the small camp they had set up. "Don't panic. The dragon is harmless," Harry shouted to assure the inhabitants the safety of the camp. But the howling winds and fear of dragons proved to be an effective barrier in warding off his words from having the intended effect. Wizards and witches ran out of their tents in droves, screaming their hearts out. Harry immediately touched his throat with the tip of his wand when he saw the chaos unfolding. "Sonorous! Go back to your tents. The dragon is harmless." The magnifying charm did the trick in projecting his sound to all the camp's inhabitants. "But my lord, that's a dragon," Keith said with frightened eyes. "So what?" Harry shrugged, walking a few paces away from the folk in the camp. Once he put some distance from the people, the dragon landed in front of him, unceremoniously kicking up sleet mixed with sand. If it weren't for the shield he put up, Harry would have most likely swallowed a whole lot of snow and sand. "Your wings seem to have healed," Harry observed. The red dragon let out a huff through its nose and stretched its wings to show it was completely healed. "Good for you. So, what's the plan now? You could go anywhere you know. Find a nice place to nest and hunt in the mountains away from goblins or wizards," Harry suggested. The dragon cocked its head to the side before looking back at the castle, making Harry frown thoughtfully. "You want to stay here?" Harry asked curiously. Harry's eyes widened in realization when the dragon bobbed its enormous head. "You want to stay with me?" Harry asked, staring into the large yellow eyes of the huge dragon. The dragon lay down on the ground and looked expectantly at him. It took Harry a moment to realize what the dragon was doing. It was all so surreal, but excitement smashed away the doubts in his mind. He made tentative steps towards the dragon and let out a breath he was holding when he reached the neck of the dragon. His eyes lit up when the dragon adjusted itself, giving him a clear path to climb onto its neck. Harry didn't think anything else and followed his instincts by climbing atop the dragon. He promptly used the sticking charm on himself once he nuzzled between two giant spikes and cushioning charms to make himself comfortable. He could see the inhabitants of the camp looking at him with their jaws on the floor. "All right then. Let's fly." The dragon let out a roar before flapping its massive wings. Harry slightly lurched forward despite the sticking charm as the dragon climbed into the sky. "Hoo-hoo!" Harry laughed as he soared through the sky, riding a dragon. It was not the first time he was flying, but this was the first time he was riding a dragon, and the feeling was powerful. At first, he thought it was because of speed, but he dismissed that absurd thought as he could fly faster in his spirit form. "No, it's because of the powerful magic emanating from the dragon I'm riding," Harry thought, nodding to himself as they soared high into the sky. Closing his eyes, he could feel the draconic magic pulsing with a unique magical signature emanating from the dragon's body. He knew what it was. It was the raw form of fire magic, given shape and form. Ultimately, dragons were creatures of fire given shape and form by magic. Dragons were supposed to be the guardians of Elysium, while the giants were supposed to be the gatekeepers of the mythical dimension that was the source of all magic. He had read about several elder races of magic from the tomes and scrolls in Slytherin's personal collection. Dragons were one of the most prominent races. It was no coincidence that dragon blood had such innumerable properties when used correctly. He didn't know how long they sailed among the clouds. But he returned to reality when the dragon made a steep dive towards the ground, making the air rush past Harry. It felt like his heart was about to exit through his mouth. Thankfully, the dragon gracefully pulled out of the dive and glided over the surface of the Black Lake with its talons and tail skimming the surface. It gracefully landed on the side of the Black Lake near Hogwarts, and Harry carefully dismounted from the dragon's back once it settled on the ground. That was exhilarating. I can see the appeal of being a dragon rider, Harry muttered, patting the long neck of the red dragon with his gloved hand. The dragon shook its head before settling down on the ground with its head tucked between its limbs. Harry found it amusing that the dragon was now peeking at him from between its limbs. One moment, the dragon was all adventurous, and in the next, it acted like a shy toddler. Harry frowned thoughtfully before looking towards the castle to find a familiar figure walking towards them at a sedate pace. "I think it's time that you take a name. How does Athena sound?" Harry asked, but the dragon withdrew into itself, refusing to communicate with him any further. "You are naming that dragon after the Greek goddess of war?" Rowena asked with some amusement. "Athena is also the goddess of wisdom. She had the wisdom to behave in your presence," Harry said with a chuckle, seeing the dragon snort out a puff of smoke in displeasure. "It's fascinating to see a familiar bond form between a wizard and a dragon. I think this is the first time in our islands," Rowena commented, her green eyes holding a peculiar gleam that was hard for Harry to discern. Is there something that you wanted, Rowena?" Harry asked. "Your method of magic seems to be easier for the students to learn. We've been noticing a marked improvement in their spell work as of late." "I see. That's mostly because the students already have a thorough base in magic. You've educated them very well," said Harry. "I doubt that," Rowena said with a slight smile before her expression smoothened out. "We are impressed with your unique magical skills, and I'd like to see it imparted to the children on a more permanent basis." "What are you saying?" Harry questioned the woman. "We'd like to offer you a permanent spot in Hogwarts. Like the rest of us, you can make Hogwarts your home and spend the rest of your life educating the young ones on the intricacies of magic." Harry was, in parts, surprised by the offer, but at the same time, he was sort of expecting it. "As I told you earlier, I'm on a journey to unearth the secrets of time. At the same time, I might get called back to my home by my family. If they call, I've got to leave." "You could build a home here and have a family," said Rowena. "It's not that simple," Harry said nervously, reluctant not to divulge any details. "Why? You said you were not your family's heir and have traveled afar from your people. Why go back when you could build a new life here?" asked Rowena. Harry had no answer to that question. He had even asked himself the same question for many sleepless nights while lying in bed. He had almost given up hope in finding anything of value regarding time magic in Hogwarts. The fact that the founders had also bluntly told him they had never encountered time magic was also a blow to his hopes. As of now, he had little hope of returning to his time from his end. All his hope was now on the incompetent ministry, and he felt they were their usual bumbling self. Still, he hoped Dumbledore and the Flammels would never allow him to be lost. Their self-interest would make them work hard to rescue him from the clutches of time. Of course, it was possible that even Dumbledore and his grandmother might fail in their endeavor. "I suppose I could stay for a while." Harry hedged a little. Rowena hummed in the back of her throat before she moved into his personal space. Harry was a little taken aback as he was treated with a full-blown equivalent of a death stare from Basilisk from Rowena Ravenclaw. "That'll do for now, I suppose. Now come. We have something important to talk about," said Rowena, taking his hand into her own before dragging him towards Hogwarts. Harry had the distinct feeling that Rowena was giving him some mixed signals. Either way, he was curious to find out what the future holds as he had nothing better to do. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Harry muttered to himself as he followed Rowena Ravenclaw. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Harry Potter. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.